Good morning. Good morning, everyone. How are you? We're so grateful that you're here. My name is Bill Mueller. I'm the CEO of Valley Vision. Welcome to Future Forum. So we're grateful that you've taken time out of your busy day to sort of take a glimpse with us into the future. And we have just a dynamite program that's action-packed. And we really are excited about the fact that this is also an interactive meeting. So we hope that you'll get out your smartphones, because later on we're going to be asking you to weigh in on what the reality is for you in your business or your agency. So please get out your cell phones or your mobile devices, and we're going to be asking you questions as we go along. So I'm pleased and honored that Valley Vision is working on behalf of your hosts, the 4 area workforce boards. Let's give it up for them. So how many people here, and this is a bit of a loaded question, but how many people here know what workforce boards do? Pretty much. But the way it's been sort of described to me, and we have a bit of a lived experience, is that they help employers find quality people. That's their job. So that businesses can do what businesses do, which is to produce services and products for their businesses. The other thing that workforce boards do is they look over the horizon. They try to look ahead at what the trends are, so that they make sure that the talent pipeline is full of qualified people. And that's part of the reason why we're here today. So today is an opportunity for our 4 workforce boards to step forward. This is the first time that they've worked together to produce an event like this. And I'd like to take a moment to recognize each of them. So the first is SETA Sacramento Works. Let's give it up for them. SETA Sacramento Works. They serve Sacramento County, and Executive Director Kathy Kosick. Kathy, where are you? And Rick Wiley, right up here in front. Let's thank them for their leadership. So Golden Sierra serves El Dorado, Placer, and Alpine counties, and Executive Director Jason Buckingham is here together with his chairman, Rick Larkey. And the Yolo County Workforce Innovation Board serves Yolo County, and Executive Director Elaine Little is here. So is Elaine here? Let's recognize her. Thank you, Elaine. And then finally, the North Central Counties Consortium, which serves Yuba, Sutter, Colusa, and Glenn counties. And Executive Director Cindy Newton is here with us today. So Cindy. Our workforce development boards are doing amazing work helping all of us and helping employers, and we could not be happier to be a program support team here at Valley Vision, helping them do the good work that they do. So we're really excited about today's program. The summit is focused on the future of work, how businesses can take advantage of the technology disruption that is happening in areas of algorithms, of automation, and artificial intelligence. So this is how the morning flow will go. So first of all, we're going to hear from the local assemblyman. We're here in his district. He is not only our host, but he also is working on these issues. Next, we're going to hear from a dynamic futurist who happens to come from business. He's going to tell us more about the future and how we can leverage technology. And then we have a panel of distinguished experts to really sort of ground what we're hearing in what is the lived experience here among employers in our region. And then finally, we're excited to have Anish Raman, who is from the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development, just recently renamed the Office of Economic Impact. So Anish is going to tell us about what the governor's workforce and economic priorities are going to be, now new into his term. And Anish brings another bit of insight, is that he was an executive at Facebook, so he's going to be able to to help us sort of understand where that technology giant is going as well. So I'd like to welcome to the stage our first speaker. We are in Assemblyman Kevin Kiley's home district here in District 6, which includes portions of El Dorado, Placer, and Sacramento counties. Assemblyman Kiley is, again, not only our host today, but he is actively working on these economic and workforce issues. Please join me in welcoming Assemblyman Kevin Kiley.
Can I be heard? Oh. That's one thing I'm not criticized for often, is speaking too quietly. Thanks. And then, of course, we have the challenges. Testing. Okay. I kind of like this. Now I can move around. And then we have the challenges that come from government itself, which are perhaps more strenuous in California than in any other state. We have probably the most, the litigation traps for business owners of any state in the country. We have the labor code that, as the HR folks here know, is probably unique among the 50 states. We have new regulations every single year that require new compliance and that don't allow for the sort of certainty and planning that you would like to have as a business owner or a manager. So, and on top of all of that, this last year we had something that's really shaken a lot of folks in the business community, and that's the Dynamex decision, which I'm sure many people here have been dealing with the fallout from. Which has, in many industries, basically done away with independent contracting as a viable option. So I've been working in the legislature to try to change that paradigm, where we seek to actually empower the business community. I jointly authored, along with my neighboring Assemblyman Cooley, a bill to create an economic development strategy for the first time for the state of California, which importantly would have recognized the regional differences that exist across California, so that we don't legislate as if the entire state were San Francisco and LA, which is what you see sometimes when, for example, we have a minimum wage bill that is uniform throughout the entire state, despite the differences in local business communities, despite the differences in cost of living. And a major focus of mine as well has been career technical education, which represents sort of an intersection of my focus on trying to improve the way the state approaches the business community and the other main issue I work on, which is education. And that, of course, is a major focus of the organizations here today. Career technical education and the nexus between the business community and our schools when it comes to workforce development and providing good paying jobs for a lot of students either out of high school, or maybe they'll take their skills on to community college or some other type of post-secondary education, but will develop skills that can actually provide for good jobs and fill vital gaps that exist right now in our workforce and are only projected to get worse in the years ahead if we don't start doing things differently. You know, for a long time, we had this mantra that every student needs to go to college. That's just the way it ought to be. And I believe that every student deserves the opportunity to go to college, but there should also be different pathways available. And that's why I'm so encouraged by the revival that we're starting to see in career technical education, not only in our communities here, but actually across the entire state. And there's tremendous work going on with the organizations sponsoring today's event and in school districts throughout this area in Placer County and other parts of the region to really bring back career technical education at our schools. So I want to thank everyone again for being here. Thank you for the tremendous work that you are doing for workforce development and economic opportunity in our entire region. And I look forward to continuing our work together in the months and years ahead. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Can we give another round of applause for the Assemblyman? So we wouldn't be here without the financial support of the California Workforce Board. And let's thank them, along with our other supporters. And that includes Project Attain, Valera, Sacramento County, Siemens, Sacramento State, and the Philip M. Cunningham Law Corporation. So please, let's say thank you again for all their financial underwriting. So the next part of our program, we are having a business futurist come and talk to us. We're really excited that Patrick is part of our program. Our interest is in having him talk to us about the trends that he is seeing. And there will be an opportunity for you to ask him questions. So we're going to have mics roving after his talk. So as you're thinking about what Patrick is sharing with us, please be thinking about those questions, and we really want this to be interactive. So Patrick Schwartzfigger is really someone that we need to pay attention to because he came from business and then became a futurist. And he is not only a renowned speaker on this topic, but he's also written for major newspapers and publications around the country. And he is sought after not only in the US, but globally. So please join me in welcoming to the stage, Patrick. Patrick.
I came from the other side.
How could I possibly be less dressed up than you?
Yeah.
I mean,
I
I'm
had to
looking
wear
like
a tie.
futurist right now.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking like I shouldn't be here. Good morning, you guys. It's nice to be back in Sacramento. I lived in Walnut Creek for 14 years. I just moved down to Newport Beach last August. So it's really nice to be here. I have a number of friends in the area. We're going to have a mastermind this afternoon and go for dinner, and then I'm flying back tomorrow. So anyway, really nice to be here, and thank you all for coming so early in the morning. We're going to talk about disruptive innovation, the future of work. And boy, this is an exciting time. And you all know that. You don't need someone like me to tell you that, of course. But really interesting things that are going on. And for me, I cover technology. I do maybe 40 or 50 events a year. And they're all over the place, and they always intersect with different industries or different parts of the world, or some are governments, the majority is corporate. So the thing I love most about what I do is I get this exposure to all of this different, these different circumstances. And one of the things I like most about this audience is because from what I understand, there's a whole bunch of different businesses represented here. And I love that because we can talk broadly about the trends that are happening, knowing that every one of you are likely going to have different ideas of how you can implement that in your own industry and in your own business. So in any case, as I mentioned, I do cover technology. That's kind of my primary focus. And of course, that's an exploding field. So I'm not going to bore you today, I promise, with a whole bunch of charts. But I do want to show you a couple, and I'm going to start with this one here. And what we're talking about is the cost of storing 1 terabyte of data. Okay, and I know this is simple stuff, but I want you to just to see the scale of what I'm referring to. We've heard these sorts of analogies a million times, but it's really fascinating. So in 2020, the cost of storing 1 terabyte of data was approximately $17,000. So does anyone want to hazard a guess of what we're expected to pay for the same thing in 2 years? Just yell it out, or 1 year. What was that? 300. Anyone else? 3. Who said that? That is the right answer. That is the right answer. $3. And this is, I mean, seriously, like, again, I know you've heard it before, but this is unbelievable. Like, what's happening here is unbelievable. And it truly is part of, and by the way, it's not just data storage. It's data bandwidth, data processing, and data storage. All three. Those are the 3 pillars of technology, right? Is data processing, data storage, data bandwidth. That's the spine of the technology industry, right? And all 3 of them are going through this exponential curve where they're, you know, and everyone, see, when people look at these exponential curves, they always think about how it goes up and to the right, which it does, of course. But the inverse of that is that the cost of any one technology goes down to the floor, right? It's like it approaches free. I mean, it doesn't quite get there, but it's pretty darn close. And so when you think, I mean, this exponential, we'll talk about it in a second, but, you know, we're human beings. We are hardwired to think in linear terms. So you have to really coach yourself. I do it myself. I am always like, no, what if it was 10 times as powerful as it is today? Or better yet, think about the most advanced technology that you're implementing in your business today. What if that technology was 1/10 the cost of what you're paying for it? How many of your competitors would be doing the same thing if it was 1/10 what you're paying? So and that's how you think exponentially, right? But this collapse in the cost structure of data is driving the whole thing, and you get like the Internet of Things, right? Some people call that, you know, machine to machine. There's estimates now we're going to have over 50 billion devices connected through the internet by 2020. It's incredible because once 5G rolls out, 5G is coming. The mobile, you know, 4G is what we all have now on our phones. So 5G, it's going to allow a sensor, a little plastic sensor, to get power from a Wi-Fi network. So it doesn't even need a cord to be connected to anything. You just stick it on the wall wherever you want. It's got enough power to measure whatever it's measuring and send the signal to some sort of a unit that can pick it up. So imagine, and these sensors could be a quarter, 25 cents each, or even less. So you can imagine the explosion of sensors we're going to have just in the next 5 to 10 years. Like the IoT, we're just getting started, right? And so one of the early winners of the kind of big data revolution with all this new data being collected was predictive maintenance. So you could actually, for example, you could put sensors for, say, heat and vibration on a machine. And with those 2 sensors, you can anticipate when that machine's going to go down and fix it ahead of schedule, right? Rather than waiting for the line to come to a stop unexpectedly, and all of a sudden you got to shut everything down to try and fix the machine. So that was one of the early applications, right? And every innovation, there's always going to be early winners. We'll talk about some others, like in artificial intelligence. But with the predictive maintenance, we've seen huge applications, of course, in manufacturing and in mining. In fact, the mining stuff, guys, is so cool. So they put sensors on the drill bits themselves. So while they're drilling, in real time, they're mapping their because they sense the heat and the pressure and everything. So they're dynamically mapping, geological mapping underneath the ground while they're drilling, and they can change directions to optimize the drill. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's happening today. And so, of course, we've seen applications in oil and gas. One of the most interesting areas to follow is what they call facilities management. So just a room like this is an unbelievable facility. So the thing probably has 200 sensors, you know, measuring different things in different parts of the room. One of the best examples of that today is the complex going up in New York called Hudson Yards. 19 skyscrapers. They just had a big opening. Some of you guys are nodding. Really cool what they're doing there. Incredible. They built it on top of a rail yard and never shut the rail yard down while they were building. And some of those buildings are like 90 stories tall. Imagine to try and build those buildings on top of a rail yard with that kind of anchoring required. But anyway, it's going to be the most censored residential environment in the world when it opens 2021. But of course, that won't last long because there's a million other projects in other parts of the world that have even more, right? Just because we're on that progression. And all the data is being aggregated onto the smart grid. Probably one of the best examples of that is in Singapore, doing some really cool stuff. But we're seeing smart city developments happening all over the world. all over the world. So we truly are part in the middle of this exponential environment. So here's where I want to talk a little bit about this, because what I'm trying to do is kind of create a foundation for the conversation, right? And these things, again, I know you've heard many of these things before in one context or another, but it's so important just to kind of lay the foundation. And exponential thinking is something that is really, I mean, there's a lot of books being written about this right now, actually. It's not easy to do. It seems not possible. The numbers get too big too fast once you project out far enough. Like, you're okay for 4 or 5, 6 iterations, but once you get past that, the numbers are going up so high, it's like, this can't possibly be true. And meanwhile, it actually is happening that way, right? So one of the best examples of exponential progress, in the recent time, and again, I know you've heard the story, but it's the Human Genome Project, right? And so check this out, it's fascinating. The Human Genome Project started in 1990. That's when they started the project. And 7 years later, they had only completed 1%. And so all the pundits come out, on the evening news, and they're like, my gosh, we're going to need 700 more years. It takes 7 years to do 1%. Like, you just do the math. It's going to take a long time. And of course, that's not what happened. And there's some people who really do think, in an exponential way. Probably the best example is Ray Kurzweil. Probably a few of you follow Ray Kurzweil. Works for Google today. Really interesting guy. Anyway, he said, so check this out. He said, if we're at 1%, we're almost done. How is that possible? He said, if we're at 1%, we're halfway there. Because if it's scaling, so if it's scaling at 100% per year, right, which means it's going twice as much every year, the speed is doubling, okay? How many years does it take to get from 1% to 100? It's only 6.5. Okay, the first year it goes 1 to 2, second year to 4, 8, 16, 32, that's 5 years. 64 is the 6th year. 7th year, you're over the top. How's that possible? Like, how's that possible? Right now, solar energy is accounting for about 1% of total energy production. Now, it's not scaling at 100% per year, to be clear, but it's incredible what these things can actually happen. And that's exactly how it played out. They actually finished it. And this is actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which means it was scaling at a little bit more than 100% per year. Right? But that's how fast these things can happen. If we're at 1%, we're almost done. If we're at 1%, we're almost done. That's crazy, but it's happening. And the reason this whole disruptive innovation conversation is becoming so prevalent everywhere, you can't turn around without someone talking about disruptive innovation, is because technology evolves along an exponential curve, and all these businesses are getting caught off guard. Right? Because it goes from nothing, like you can't even see the business, and all of a sudden it's taking over your entire industry in what seems like the blink of an eye. So we're seeing this all over the place. These are propagation curves of various technologies over the last 100 years. And you can see that it's kind of going from 0 to, let's say, 80%. 80% is generally accepted as being full adoption. But the lines are getting steeper and steeper. So these new technologies are going from 0 to 80 in record time, and that's affecting business. This is a crazy study that came out of Washington University, and this is like scary even. 40% of S&P 500 companies will no longer exist by 2026. Wow, that's incredible. Right? Is that possible? Could that happen? And what happens is, like all these, okay, this is all I do. I get like 90% of my income is speaking fees. So I'm always going to different conferences. And it doesn't matter where you are, any industry, different parts of the world, generally two things are always the same. Number one, everyone says they're behind. In every industry, they're like, oh, we're really behind. And it's not everyone's behind, because guess what? Things are going really, really quick. Like, I do this full time and I'm behind. So everyone's behind. Number two, right? I mean, you can't keep up, right? Number two, the executives are terrified. I mean, if you really peel back the layers of the onion, people are really nervous because of this, right? And so they take a defensive posture, right? They're like, who's going to eat our lunch? That's what they're worried about. They're worried that someone's going to come along and take their revenue stream away. And my feeling is that is exactly the wrong. It's like literally the opposite approach of what I think. Because if 40% of the businesses are gone, like, who's going to take their place? It's not like the economy is going to disappear. The economy is going to stay there, right? So if these big companies fail, someone's going to come in and fill that void with a better solution, right? So I think you should be saying, who else's lunch can we eat? Like, and I know that's a cheesy metaphor, okay, but it's true, right? Like, why can't we just look for new revenue opportunities? If we know that, like, everyone's on shaky ground, why can't we just expect that and stay on offense and try and figure out how we can capture some of that business and bring it into our own companies, right? And that's really the majority of my work is doing stuff like that, doing strategy sessions to help people look for that. So what I invite you to do, it's a short session that I have, but I invite you just to kind of take a step back and forget about maybe the specific business that you run or that you contribute to or the role you have. Everyone's got milestones and deadlines. I'm sure you all are very busy, but just for 40 minutes or so, 30 minutes, just let me tell you about some of the, because I study this stuff all the time, and I'm a total nerd, and I'm a geek, and I love this stuff. So let me tell you about some of the things that I'm finding out about, and some of the trends that are really accelerating. And I'd like to start with a quick story. Just out of curiosity, does anyone here recognize either of these two people? Wow, okay, just a couple of you. Okay, so we'll start with the guy on the left. His name is Brian Acton, and in 2009, Brian Acton was looking for work in the Bay Area, and he applied to work at both Twitter and Facebook, and they both turned him down. So, and if you've been following, I've been following this guy for a long time, and he's actually a really nice guy. He's a gracious guy. So anyway, at the time, he wrote a tweet about it. Here's the tweet. It said, "Facebook turned me down. It's a great opportunity to connect with some fantastic people. Looking forward to life's next adventure." And what might that be? Well, he got together with a friend of his and started WhatsApp, which they grew over the course of 5 years and sold to none other than Facebook for a cool $19 billion. So, I'm bitter. I admit it. I'm 48. He's a lot younger than I am. It's a lot of money. Anyway, so again, the pundits come out, of course, on the evening news, and they start analyzing. And this was a record-breaking transaction. It was not a common transaction, right? But anyway, there's a few different ways you can look at it. One way is that at the time of the sale, WhatsApp had 55 employees. So by that measure, Facebook paid $345 million per employee. That's amazing, right? In other ways, at the time of the sale, they had approximately 450 million active monthly users. So by that measure, they paid $42 per user. Either way, it's an awful lot of money. But maybe the best way to look at a transaction like this is that 5 years, right? Like 5 years ago was 2014. Like, to me, that feels like yesterday. Like, it's incredible. This is not a long time. Over the course of 5 years, 55 employees managed to engage over 450 million active monthly users in 5 years. How many people are here? Like 250 or something? Like 55 employees, just like a group that big, builds something that touches the lives of 500 million people, right? And that speaks to the leverage that's in the system. So anytime you see a speaker in any conference, whatever, he or she always has like a couple of key messages that they're hoping you're going to walk away with. And spoiler alert, this is one of mine, okay? Because there's more and more leverage in the system all the time. Like every year, there's more leverage in different facets of the world, finances and so on. But the 900-pound elephant in the room is technology. And technology is a form of leverage. Like the whole, the division between rich and poor, right? Number one, that's true, right? It's widening like really quickly right now, which is to some extent a mathematical imperative. But it's also a function of this leverage. Right? Like, so in other words, some people are on the right side of the leverage equation. So they're leveraging technology, right? And for the most part, they're doing really well. But there's a whole bunch of people and a lot of businesses that are they're on the wrong side of the leverage equation. So they're being leveraged by technology that someone else is controlling. And for them, it's harder and harder every year to get the same results they had last year, right? And that's very true. That dynamic's playing out all the time. But as business leaders, like the responsibility is on us to make sure we're on the right side of the leverage equation, which means what? It means we have to run towards the changes. We have to run towards the technology. It means we have to try the technology and try to implement it despite the fact that it might fail, right? Innovation can be summarized in one concept: budgeting failure. Like you have to try something new. Jeff Bezos, that guy is genius. If you know it's going to work, it's not an experiment. Like, that's brilliant, and it's so bloody simple. Right? Like it's just another one. So that guy, I'm telling you, Jeff, you might like him or hate him, but he's seriously brilliant. If you had how does this work? If you had a 10% chance for a 100x return, you would take that bet every day. You'll still fail 90% of the time. That's insanity. Seriously, think about it. It's a mathematical imperative. It's a mathematical no-brainer. Take the bet. You're still going to fail 90%. Anyway, it's crazy. So that's what innovation is. We have to try new things. We have to try new technologies, knowing it might not work, right? That's the challenge of it, is having the guts to do that, right? So there's all kinds of different forms of technology-based leverage, right? Including software. Software is a form of leverage, right? You can leverage software, right? The cloud is a form of leverage. You can leverage the cloud. You can leverage mobile technology. Increasingly, you can leverage wearable technology. Really cool stuff that's coming out right now, right? Really wild. And of course, virtual reality is kind of right around the corner. Microsoft just got a $400 million order for augmented reality headsets for the military. That's a major, major indicator. That is, we're finally turning the corner. Sooner or later, we're going to see a broad market adoption headset. When that happens, everything changes. A lot of things change. Sooner or later, some 13-year-old kid on some YouTube star is going to be photographed wearing one of these things walking down the street, and then everyone will buy one, and it'll happen, right? That's probably what will happen. Anyway, so and there's training applications, so it's not just video games, right? And we see robotics coming up. This is Baxter. The price comes down every year. Capabilities go up. And we're seeing robots showing up in hotels, concierge services. We're seeing security robots in shopping malls. We're seeing information robots in airports, right? And those are leading innovators right there. So you can model these things to see the future, right? So hotels and shopping malls and hospitals and stadiums, these are places that have a huge amount of people, and so they have a financial incentive to adopt the new technology sooner. So you can see what they're doing in airports or what they're doing in a shopping mall and anticipate what's probably going to happen in smaller stores later and maybe eventually in our homes, right? There's a propagation curve. You can follow these propagation curves and get a clear idea of what's coming down the pipe. But they're all examples of leverage, right? People are leveraging these technologies. So there's really, I don't mean to talk so fast, it's because I've got a ton of stuff I'm going to pack into this. So I just want to try and get through a lot of content. But I want to cover really two things in a bit more detail. The first one is artificial intelligence and machine learning, which is everywhere right now. And the second is blockchain technology. So, and I'm going to touch on both, but let's start with machine learning. So, and people say, like, what constitutes artificial intelligence? Because a lot of it is just good analytics. It's just a good algorithm. Like, is it really artificial intelligence? Not necessarily. So, what's required for it to be considered artificial intelligence? Well, there's really two things, and the first is that it implies some sort of human-level comprehension, right? And the second, which is more important, is that it has an ability to learn. It has to have an ability to learn. That's the essence of artificial intelligence. So the early winner, right? The early winner of big data was predictive maintenance. Early winner of artificial intelligence was these recommendation engines, right? So you go to Amazon or some website and it recommends different products. Or if you're watching movies on Netflix, it's giving a recommendation on what you might like. And if you're listening to Pandora, it's the same thing. But that's actually already kind of old news. Like it kind of started, 8-9 years ago. So it's kind of, it's not a huge deal anymore. So what's happening right now? Well, there's another one that's propagating right now, which is, did I just skip over a slide? Yeah, right here. Natural language processing. So this is, so it is, I'll go ahead here. So it is the Siri on Apple, right? And then, of course, the Google phone has this as well. And then you've got Amazon Alexa and Google introduced their Google Home as well. Just out of curiosity, how many of you, and don't put your hands up for me, but for everyone else to see, how many of you have either Amazon Alexa or Google Home in your homes right now? Take a look around. Holy smoke. Yeah, it's probably 30%, maybe 25, 30%. Right, and you wait, like in 2-3 years, it's just going to become ubiquitous. In fact, I was in a hotel the other day, and they had an Alexa in the hotel room. It was a Hilton, and I could say, like, close the curtains, and it closed the curtains. It was wild. But anyway, where is the application of this technology? Where's the financial incentive? Well, it's turning the corner right now. Like, it's hard for the natural language processing is referred to quite often as NLP. So with NLP, the problem is, like with Alexa, I can say, Alexa, what's the temperature outside? And she'll say it's, 67 degrees. But if I then say, will it be warmer tomorrow? Now she's stumped, right? I have to stop and say, Alexa, will it be warmer tomorrow than today? Now she can do it, right? And if you want her to try the social bot to actually continue adding context, you can say, Alexa, let's chat. And then they'll turn it on, and she'll try to add context as you go along. It's really, and it's clunky. It's not that good yet. But it, guys, is turning the corner right now, right? And so you have these companies that have hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of people in a call center. Imagine the HR nightmare. I'm sure some of you have huge call centers that you manage. What a nightmare to hire these people and people calling in sick and training and trying to get consistent protocol delivery. It's a disaster, right? Meanwhile, you can have a computer, and this, guys, this is like 2-3 years away. Like, we're right there. We're right there. And the computer will be more consistent, and believe me, the young kids, let's say people whose ages start with a 2 or a 3, right? My age starts with a 4, okay? They'd rather talk to a computer than a person, right? I mean, the older people, we want to talk to a person, right? We want to be driven by a person, not the young kids. They're like, I'd rather give me the machine. So, and there are 3 million people in this country alone in call centers. Imagine the financial incentive to implement this. It's huge. The cost savings is enormous. And meanwhile, you can split test, you can optimize conversations, the whole thing. I mean, it's just a no-brainer. So that's definitely going to happen, right? Another area is image and object recognition, right? Including things like facial recognition and so on. But when it comes to stuff like this, it's being used a lot in advanced manufacturing. And of course, this is a critical piece to the autonomous driving deal. So let's talk about that, because that's coming way faster than people think. Way faster than people think. So what's the most complicated place to drive? Right in the middle of the city. City driving is the most complex, right? So who's in the lead? Well, most people would say that Google's Waymo is in the lead. They've got like 600 cars out there. They've got 10 million miles driven and something like 7 billion virtual miles driven. But at the end of the day, they've got, roughly 10 million miles driven. But Tesla has data on over 1 billion miles. They got almost 500,000 cars on the road with the sensors. So whether people are using the autopilot or not, the car is collecting data. They're just stockpiling all this insane data. So they've got a huge advantage. Uber is collecting a whole ton of data. They're making a big play, right? That's where this is going, by the way. Transport as a service. I mean, Uber, 75% of the cost is the salary of the driver. So you can drop the price by 2/3 and still have more profits if you can do it autonomously, right? And you know that Uber's going to take Wall Street money and buy 100,000 cars in a day. So it's not going to be people buying these cars. It's going to be fleets, which is also going to screw up the insurance industry, because you're going to have enterprise fleet insurance rather than individual insurance. It's a totally different game. Like, it changes so many things. Anyway, in California, you've got Didi, which is the equivalent of Uber in China, right? So these are kind of the leaders in the city driving space. I'm guessing that's going to deploy 2022-ish, maybe 2023. But what has less obstacles than city driving? Well, freeways, right? Freeways have fewer obstacles than city driving. So that's going to deploy first, right? It makes sense. It's going to deploy first. It's easier to do, right? Hub to hub, long-haul trucking. So we had the test, the proof of concept, the POC, that happened last summer with Otto. This is a company that was purchased by Uber. They ran this thing 125 miles down the freeway and to Colorado Springs. There was a guy in the cab, but he wasn't driving. Payload was 50,000 cans of Budweiser. It got there on time. So funny. Anyway, so I mean, Mercedes is coming out with their autonomous truck, right? And the bottom line is, if you don't need a driver, you don't need a cab. So here's the Volvo version. This is unbelievable, right? So this is the kind of stuff that's happening, right? And I would bet that some state in this union, I don't know which one, but some state will legalize long-haul, hub-to-hub, long-haul trucking in their state, maybe by the end of this year. Like, we're very close. If not this year, certainly next year. In some state, maybe Texas, who knows? I have no idea. But what has fewer obstacles than freeway driving? Agricultural land, right? This is happening today. This is already done, right? And this thing, look at this. This thing's badass. I mean, no joke. I would love to buy one of these myself. Look at that. Look at the wheels. Look at the wheels on it. Like, I would love to own that. It's crazy. And where else, right? In the mining operations, right? This is happening today. They've got autonomous trucks that do the whole deal, right? So that legislation's already been passed. We're good to go. So again, you can see the propagation curve. It's already done in mining and agricultural land. I think 12 months from now, someone's going to start with the hub-to-hub long-haul trucking, and maybe we got 3-4 years before we hit city streets. And the propagation will be quick. So at the end of the day, what we're really waiting for is just the regulatory approval. And they still have work to do. I mean, it's not like the algorithms are ready to go, but you can measure the progress, and it's getting close, right? It's getting very close. Well, there's 3.5 million commercial drivers in this country. 3.5 million commercial drivers. It's incredible. Right now, before we go on to the next example, how do they learn? And this is key. So, and I talked about this with a few the folks here. We went out for dinner last night, which was awesome. And I talked about this same case history. So there's a guy, lives in the Santa Cruz Hills, and he owns a Tesla. And when the autopilot was released, the hardware was already on the cars. So it was just a software upgrade, and it was ready to go. Anyway, he was driving home one day, and on the way to his home in the Santa Cruz Hills is a very tight corner. So, and this isn't it. I just bought this image, but there's a tight corner on the way to his house. Okay. Anyway, and that first day, he drove towards that corner and took his hands off the wheel and was like, "All right, let's see what you got." That takes balls. I'm not sure I would have done it. Anyway, so the car, it didn't crash, okay, but like it veered out of the lane, and of course the brakes came on very hard, and the warning to take, so it was essentially a fail. But then the next day, he did it again, and then he did it again, and again, and again. And in 2 weeks, the car knew how to take the corner. But it wasn't just his car that knew how to take the corner. It was every Tesla. Guys, does this make sense? This is so key. This is like the most important. They call it fleet learning. If you go down to Sand Hill Road in the Bay Area, down by Palo Alto, that's like the VC capital, they're all talking about fleet learning and network effects, and that's the genius of the cloud, guys, because if you can take the individual experience from people on the network and upload their experience to the cloud, where the true intelligence is up here, then you can deploy those improvements across the whole network. Right, so you have a better driving experience as a result of something that someone else experienced. Does that make sense? That's why it's accelerating. Like, that's why this whole thing. That's why that's what exponential is. Like, it's happening so quickly, right? So we're part of this situation where these network effects, this fleet learning capability, this cloud capability, which allows for that, is driving this forward. Right, at a really, really quick rate. So, and we see like all sorts of applications of this kind of stuff. I'm sure a lot of you have been following the RPA, the robotic process automation, which is going on. Probably the best example of this that I've seen was the trading floor in Connecticut, UBS trading floor, 2005, and this is 2016. They're all gone. They're all gone. Why? Because all of that's being done by algorithms today. Right, and there was a study that came out of Oxford a couple of years ago that looked at all sorts of countries around the world. They said that 47% of the jobs in the United States are likely to be displaced by automation in the next 10 to 15 years. And that number was actually lower than some of the developing countries like China at 77%, India at 69%. Unbelievable, right? And so there's all sorts of models of which jobs are most likely to be affected. This is just one of them, so this is not the only one. You can do a Google search and find 100 others. But you can get an idea of some of the jobs that are most likely to be displaced. right? Number one on the list is loan officers. And, we all know probably about Rocket Mortgage, which is leveraging the automated underwriting platforms that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac first rolled out in 2003, right? And now that's gone full circle. Now it's ready for retail, right? Last year in March, just a little bit over a year ago, China opened their first personless bank. There's no one who works there. It's just it's a building, and at 8:30 in the morning, the doors unlock and the lights come on. You can go in and do stuff, but there's nobody there. It's crazy. Right? If you have a problem, you can call, right? And of course, Amazon has opened their Go stores up in Seattle. Right? They want to open 3,000 more of them around the country. There's 3.4 million retail cashiers in this country. So just in those three areas, right, just in those three examples, we've got 3 million people in call centers. We've got 3.5 million commercial drivers. We've got 3.4 retail cashiers, 9.9 million people. It's a lot of people that are likely to lose their jobs. And there's a lot of models that allow us to kind of conceptualize mentally what that will look like. This is just one of many. But it looks at kind of the economy more generally, and there's always exceptions when you do models like this, so it's not 100%. But basically, you can look at the jobs that we have out there and put them in one of two buckets, right? You either have manual jobs, right, or you have cognitive jobs. One of the two. Oh, did I lose it? There it goes. And in each one of those buckets, you've got repetitive tasks and you have non-repetitive tasks. So it's reasonable that at some point, the repetitive manual jobs are going to get replaced by robotics at some point, right? And it's also reasonable to assume that the repetitive cognitive jobs get replaced by algorithms, right? We don't know exactly when, but the point is it's easier to find something when you know what you're looking for, right? It's so easy for us all to sit down and write down a list of like the repetitive tasks, either in our own jobs or of the people we employ or the other people in the team, on the company. You can very easily write down all those examples and have a list, and so then it's easier to find, okay, let's look for areas where we can automate. And then the non-repetitive tasks, you end up with essentially agile humans and creative humans is really what it boils down to. But that study from Oxford suggests that roughly 47% of the tasks in our economy are essentially repetitive, right? So what are the skills we need for the future, right? Knowing all this, right, we've talked kind of about the downside. Well, on the upside, the skills that people need really boil down into one of two categories. And the first one is, complex problem solving and cognitive flexibility and all this sort of stuff, critical thinking. And then on the bottom, you've got all the people stuff. So at the end of the day, it's basically creativity and relationships. Those are the skills that are going to be most valued in the future. Now, where are the new jobs going to come from? That one's trickier because there's no question there's going to be a lot of jobs lost. Well, what are the new business opportunities? Well, you can think about that in a lot of different ways. And again, I always look for models, like how can we model how this might play out? And it might follow, I don't know this for sure, but it might essentially follow the Maslow's hierarchy of needs model. So the first businesses out there were satisfying that first layer of physiological needs, right? Food and so on, shelter, right? And then as the economy grows and we get more productive, we start having businesses in the safety area. Arguably, the whole social media is in that third category for love and belonging, right? That effectively is social media is in that kind of space. And now, in the higher echelons, we have things like business coaches or life coaches and massage therapists and healers and all these. These are all, and that never existed, 30 years ago, or at least was very, very rare. And today it's more and more common. So we can expect that probably new businesses will start to climb that ladder and satisfy higher things because the bottom ones are already so saturated. Now there might be some disruption opportunities down there where you can take a process and replace it with an entirely better process. But as far as new business models are concerned, I would expect them to probably be higher up on those Maslow's hierarchy of needs. One model, right? Another model you can look at is the whole do it yourself, do it with you, done for you model, right? So the one where you don't get any help at all, it's like do it yourself. The second one is we'll help you do it, right? And the third one is just pay us and we'll do it for you and just deliver the results. So again, we can expect the new business models to go higher up that ladder. So as a general rule, we're trending towards higher levels of service, right, in kind of any area. It's always going to be higher. Like now you've got DoorDash, right, and Uber Eats. Like you can literally just make a phone call, someone else will cook it, someone else will deliver it, all you have to do is eat it, right? Like it's a higher and higher level of service. So we're seeing going in that direction. So let's get back on track. So I want to also refer briefly to blockchain. And again, I know I'm packing in a lot, but this doesn't need to be that complicated, and that's why I wanted to include it, because I think a lot of people make it more complicated than it needs to be. So for anyone who doesn't know, blockchain is the technology behind Bitcoin. I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin today, although it's going up in value. Just right now, it's up 100% so far this year. But let's talk structurally about blockchain. So in the simplest analysis, imagine an Excel spreadsheet with a whole bunch of transactions listed on it. But instead of that spreadsheet being on one server, one computer, it's actually on hundreds or thousands of different computers simultaneously, and all those computers, they're called nodes, they have to agree through a consensus mechanism that they all have the latest, most up-to-date version, right? So that consensus process makes it really difficult to hack, because you can't just hack one computer and get away with it. It would immediately show that that's been tampered with. So you would have to hack 51% of all the nodes at exactly the same time, in exactly the same way, with exactly the same result in order for it to work, right? Makes it very, very difficult to do, right? And by the way, no one has ever hacked the Bitcoin blockchain. They've hacked into exchanges and wallets, but no one's ever hacked, and everybody's tried. Believe me, it's a lot of money. Everyone's tried, and they have not. And it's because of this consensus, this diversified consensus mechanism. But it gets even better than that. And here's the essence of blockchain. Because every time you add a new block, every time you add a new block to the chain of previous blocks, right, of the latest transactions, the newest block has a summary of the previous block inside of it, which means that every time something is put on a blockchain, you can never take it off, you can never change it, because if you did, you would have to hack every subsequent block in 51% of the nodes at the same time, same way, all success. It's never been done, right? So essentially, it's a distributed ledger, nothing more than that. But it's a software architecture which makes it essentially tamper-resistant. So effectively, blockchain automates trust. It doesn't require a person. It's just the way it's organized, it automates trust, right? So where are the applications for that? Well, again, the early winner, right? The early winner in the blockchain space was in supply chain management. So there was a proof of concept early last year, that involved 88 bales of cotton. Which were produced in Texas, and they shipped it all the way to China, and all the details of that order were included in what's called a smart contract, which was uploaded to a private Ethereum blockchain, right? And once the goods actually arrived in China and the barcodes were scanned, that automatically transferred ownership and released payment. All happened automatically. So if you want to understand what a smart contract is, it's basically just a contract that has if-then statements built into it. Right, so it's essentially a decision tree. So if you get to here, if this happens, go there. If it doesn't happen, go here and there. There's another choice and choices, and the whole thing's mapped out. It's just it's a piece of software that just says all the different possible permutations, right? And so once it's up there, it just executes itself. So you can imagine wills and contracts that execute themselves. That's effectively what a smart contract is. But the early winner was in the supply chain. Because imagine that transaction, the cotton thing. So you've got the producer in Texas, you got a trucker to get it to the port, you have a loader, that's a different company, and there's customs clearance there, and then you're on the boat, that probably has a dozen companies involved one way or another. And then on the other side, you have an offload, you have customs, and you've got another trucker, and then the final. So these transactions quite often include like 20, 25 companies. And every one of those companies has order entry, and tracking, and project management, right? And afterwards, you got audit and compliance. Those are salaries. Those are all salaries, right? And every single one of those 20 companies has those salaries. And so it's all baked into the pricing a million times over, and it all gets translated into the final cost of shipping, right? So there's a huge incentive to put this thing on a blockchain, because you can eliminate all of that and still have trust. You can do business with someone you don't trust and be safe. Right? So imagine all the different players in that particular transaction. If you upload a smart contract, which includes all those permutations, right, then they're effectively connected. Once they approve it through that consensus mechanism, they're connected on the blockchain. And if you pay for the order using a cryptocurrency, you can eliminate the banks altogether. Imagine. So crazy. And it goes into every industry, right? If you're in the automobile industry, you can have all the players in that business connected through a private blockchain to allow this to go through quicker. If you're in the real estate industry, you can have all the players of the real estate business connected through a blockchain. Makes things a lot easier. There's a lot of money to be saved. There's a financial incentive, right? So, and there's also a traceability factor because you have all those, people checking in along the way to say, yes, it's now in the boat. Yes, it's gone this far. Yes, it's here. Yes, it's there, right? And so the traceability side is very strong. And this is a startup that started actually to track diamonds originally, the whole blood diamond thing. So they're tracking diamonds from the mine to the retail shelf and using a blockchain that's transparent. And it worked so well that now they're doing the same thing for pharmaceutical medication, and they're doing the same thing for GMO foods. Right? So the whole track and trace piece is enormous, and the level of service, people talk about the Amazon effect, where people have a higher and higher expectation of service from companies because what they see Amazon doing. Blockchain can allow that in a B2B space, that same kind of track and trace and global logistics. Right? It can be used to keep track of title ownership and land property ownership in different parts of the world. This is from Colombia, when they were negotiating with the FARC rebels. There's a whole story there, but it's an application for blockchain there. Title insurance is something that could be easily replaced by a blockchain-based system because it eliminates that possibility, and you can keep track of educational certifications and degrees and so on. And there's even, this was a collaboration between Accenture and Microsoft to give digital identity to refugees, mainly the Syrian refugees. So with nothing more than a cell phone, they could prove who they were and where they came from. Biometric database, really fascinating, right? So these are really interesting, and there's a lot of opportunity there for disruptive innovation. And so just to let you know where we're at, this is the last section. It's kind of a little module. I want to talk about disruptive innovation, maybe 8 minutes, and then I've got like a few slides right at the end, maybe another 4 minutes after that, and then we're done. So think about questions, right? If you have questions, and we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. I'm also going to be back at the end of the event, more like 11:30, and so if we don't get to some questions now, we can do them later, but I just wanted to let you know where we're at. But disruptive innovation, so there's two types of innovation. There's incremental innovation and disruptive innovation, right? And incremental innovation comes from the center of expertise, right? So from the scientists and the experts and the people optimizing stuff, making things a little bit better year after year, and it's incredibly powerful. Like, it's transforming our world. We're optimizing our world with incremental innovation, but that's not what we're talking about here. Disruptive innovation invalidates existing business models. Like, it takes the whole business model and says, sorry, we don't need... So, okay, who developed the digital camera? Kodak. Kodak, the very company that got wiped out by digital cameras. Imagine. Like, and these are smart people. They are smart people, and they developed a digital camera, and they're like, that's a piece of garbage. No one's going to want it. We're sticking with film. Like, that's how this stuff happens. And it wiped out their entire business model. The business model is gone. Like, that's disruptive innovation. So you have these obvious examples, right? Apple disrupted the music business, right? Then they also disrupted the phone business, right? And then, of course, Google disrupted the phone business as well. Well, what do these have in common, right? Disruptive innovation comes from what I refer to as adjacent markets, right? They don't come from the center of expertise. They come from the sides. Like, what's an adjacent market? Think about what's your biggest supplier? Who else do they sell to? That's an adjacent market. Right? Who's your biggest customer? Who else do they buy from? That's an adjacent market, right? They're related. They're not the same, but they have overlaps, right? So you have these different industries that kind of function autonomously. They're their own industry, but they overlap in places. The disruptive innovation comes from those overlaps, right? Which is the side from any one perspective within any one industry, right? So that's why people get caught off guard. So, and you get a ton of examples, like Facebook. This is mostly in technology, but Facebook disrupted the SMS business. Right? It's an adjacent market. Of course, that's what WhatsApp did. That's what Snapchat is doing. right? LinkedIn totally disrupted the recruiting business. Different business. It was an adjacent market, right? Now Amazon disrupted the book business. That's an adjacent market for them, right? Uber Eats, like we talked about before. Can you imagine food delivery from Uber? Like, it's so crazy. That's an adjacent market. Now Amazon's doing grocery, right? We've got Tesla and Google getting into the car business, right? Those are adjacent markets. Right now Facebook's trying to get into the ISP business with these guys. These planes, they're solar-powered planes. They fly at 70,000 feet. They can be up there for months at a time, circling. They're solar-powered. They just keep going, delivering internet to the people below. And Google's in a race to try and do the same thing using their balloons. Unbelievable, right? So these are adjacent markets. Disruptive innovation comes from the edges. Right, so a classic example, like the fringe, right? What's the crazy, this is the part of the industry that no one takes seriously. So what's the cutting edge? What's the cutting edge of nutritional supplements? Where's the bleeding edge of nutritional supplements? It's in horse racing. That's where they test the latest supplements. And it makes sense, right? It's less regulated. You got $1 million on a horse. He's not quite good enough to win. You'll try anything to see if it'll work, right? That's where they tested creatine. I take creatine. Some of you probably take creatine. That came from horse racing first, right? That's where they tested D3. That's where they tested the impact of zinc loading on testosterone. All of that started in horse racing. And then when it gained traction there, it comes into the mainstream, right? What's the bleeding edge of online marketing? Guys, it's in porn, right? It's in online gambling, right? That's the place where they test the latest wireframes and lead magnets, conversion funnels. That starts in those crazy sites that no one wants to look at. You get my point. You get my point. That's where it starts. You have to be willing to look on the crazy. Look at the crazy. That's what I do all day is I'm constantly, not the porn. Can you imagine? I work at home. Anyway. No, but I'm always looking for those crazy applications. Like, where's the weird, the stuff that people laugh at? That's where it comes from. That's where disruptive innovation comes from. It comes from those places that you don't expect. And I'll give you one more, and then we'll finish up. I just have a few slides here at the end. But this is another classic. These models are thought experiments. They're so powerful. So disruptive innovation tends to, on average, it tends to cater to the least profitable market segment first. Right? Think about who's your who are the customers you hate? Oh, I hate those. They don't have any money. They're a pain in the neck. I'd be happy if those customers were gone entirely. We've all got them. We've all got those customers. That's where the disruptive, what do those people want? I'll tell you what they want. They want a simpler, less expensive solution. That's what they want. Right? But meanwhile, what do we all do? Right? We all cater to the most profitable market segment first, which are the folks at the top. And it makes perfect sense. That's where the money is. Right? Premium products. What's your upsell? What's the full service package? Like, done for you. That's the whole thing. There's a ton of money. And it's true in every single industry. So you have this pervasive upward push where every industry is constantly pushing into the premium side of their particular market segment. And who gets left behind? It's the people at the bottom, right? Like, that's where it starts. So I do these strategy sessions with these companies, and I always tell them to look up, look down, look side to side, right? Look up. That's where there's money up there. There's good money. You need those margins because innovation requires budgeting failure. Where are you going to get that money from? You're going to get it from selling premium products. You need those margins. You need that gross profit, right? At the same time, look down. That's where disruptive innovation comes from. Spend one Friday a month or every 2 weeks asking some of those strategic questions and keeping an eye on that bottom end of the market. What's going on down there? And then look side to side. Those are those new market, or those are those new revenue opportunities. Those are those adjacent markets, right? Who else's lunch can you eat? And if you do that, you can stay in front of it. You can capitalize on this stuff. You can actually stay ahead, right? Rather than always having to play catch up. You can stay on offense, right? So that's really my challenge to you, is to think about artificial intelligence and robotic process and automation and all these different opportunities. And can we use blockchain? Blockchain, by definition, is an ecosystem play. So you have to collaborate with your competitors and your customers to create a blockchain that makes sense, right? But it might make sense for you. And can you train the people that you do have on the skills of the future so that they're ready for the things that are going to be coming down the pipe? So my message really this morning is just to think way bigger about what's possible. Think way bigger, because there's some things you can take for granted when you think bigger like that. And the first is that you end up inspiring everyone around you. Like, they love it when you inspire your employees, when you inspire your customers when you're thinking. In fact, you inspire your competitors when you're thinking big. Like, you inspire the whole thing. And the second thing is, if you're really doing something big, something that people haven't tried, quite often you have no competition along the way because no one else has the courage to try it, right? And so there's a lot of people who are like poster children for this type of thinking. We've all seen these people before. I love some of these, Richard Branson. I love quotes. I literally buy books of quotes. And he has like dozens of awesome quotes. So here's my favorite Richard Branson quote. The fastest way to become a millionaire is to start out as a billionaire and then start an airline. That's genius. Genius. Anyway, so he started Virgin Galactic. Like, how much bigger are you going to get than that? Any competition? Not much. And you've got Elon Musk. This guy is like a personal hero to me. He has a lot of haters. In a group this size, I'm sure there's a few of you that don't like him, and that's fine. For me, it's hard to believe he exists. I honestly can hardly believe. It's like he spends his life doing impossible things. So it's unbelievable. But he obviously, he started SpaceX. By the way, how many of you watched the Falcon Heavy launch? There's 2 of them so far. See, if you're into this, if you're a nerd like me, if you're into this even that much, go to YouTube and search for SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch. I get shivers down my spine when I watch, because what they're doing is insane. They're reusing their rockets. Do you see that? They take the side, they're doing all 3 now. They send the darn thing up, and then they bring the rockets back down and land them like pencils on the same platform that they took off from 11 minutes earlier. How is that possible? It's just, the accomplishment of that, just from a physics perspective, is okay. So the cost of sending a rocket to the ISS, right? A Falcon 9 to ISS is International Space Station. The cost of sending a rocket to the ISS is about $60 million. It depends on the weight, cargo. $60 million. How much is the fuel? The whole price tag is $60 million. How much is the fuel? I guessed 10 million. That was my guess, 10 million. You know what the answer is? $200,000. $200,000. 1/300th of the total cost. 1/300. So if you can reuse the hardware, you can bring down the cost function by 100-fold or more. That's disruptive innovation, right? No one else is doing it. Blue Origin's giving it a go, but they're a little bit behind. Whatever. The bottom line is it's awesome either way, but it's crazy, right? So now their cost structure isn't 60 million, it's probably like 7 million, but what do they charge? They charge 55 million, which is just a little bit less than the competition, so they get the orders, and then they have a ton of profit to do what with? Innovate, and innovate, and innovate more, and innovate more, and innovate more in a way that no one else can afford because they're not reusing the hardware. You see how that works? It's so insane. And the first time they pulled it off was just at the end of 2015, right before Christmas. I was in Florida. And when they pulled it off, their employees partied like it was 1999. Average age 27, imagine. That makes them millennials. Millennials get a bad rap, don't they? People say they're lazy, apathetic, and entitled. It's not true. It's not true. Those young kids will work harder than anyone you've ever hired if you give them something inspiring to work towards. That's what they want to do. They want to do something cool, right? They want to be part of something neat. They want to change the world, right? Or populate another one, right? That's, these stories, we've heard these stories a million times before. What do they all have in common? These people thought bigger. They were like, yes, I will do the big thing. I will do the thing that no one else has done before. I will try it, even if it fails, right? So my presentation, in a sense, it's not really about, the work of the future or artificial intelligence. It's about leadership. I mean, this whole thing is about leadership. It's who's going to take a stand and say, yes, I'll do it, right? Who's going to stay on the right side of the leverage equation, right? And just think way, way bigger about what's possible. Next 10 years is going to be nothing like the last 10. Like, we're in uncharted territory. So anyway, like I said, we're going to do some questions now for whatever time we have. Also, I'm going to be back later on. I do have a handful of, I just brought one box of books. This is a book, it's called Anarchy Inc. So for those of you who like $20, I just have a few. I think I have 20. So if any of you would like one, I would love to get you one. But anyway, and I don't know how much time we have. So
Patrick, wasn't this a great talk by Patrick?
yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Very good.
Yeah.
So we do have time, and we have a couple of people roving with mics. So who has questions? So Sonia, Adrian, right over here.
Is it?
If you could please just tell us who you're with and then your question. Walt.
I'm Carlos with Yolo County. So I was listening to your presentation, and you were talking about how things are going automated, AI and stuff, and you're talking about that there's almost 10 million jobs of people being displaced.
Yeah.
Well, that's the population of more than 40 states. That's about 20 states population combined. So we're looking at about almost half of America statewide being put out of work. That's a lot of people. And so we're in a point of transition where we're taking new technology, which we're talking with the younger generation versus us, maybe the Generation X's versus baby boomers who are not apt at picking up that new technology quicker. How is that transition going to play out for those of us in that in-between stage where technology is going to be taking over potentially our jobs?
Yeah. And
then what are we going to be doing when our jobs are gone?
Yeah, this is a great, and of course this is the scary question. And I'm not going to say that it isn't scary, like it's very scary. My book's called Anarchy Inc., okay? So I believe like it's going to be a wild ride. I'm not saying it's going to be horrible. I'm not saying that. In fact, I think it's going to be pretty exciting, but there's going to be a lot of change. And as human beings, we're not very good at change. Anyway, so people think like, okay, so so take all the jobs and sort them in the order of complexity. So you get the most complex, like, physician, neurosurgeon, whatever, person up here, and the simplest, like a janitor type job, let's say at the bottom, whatever, right? And so you've got 100,000 jobs. I mean, there's tons of different jobs, right? A whole bunch. So people always think, they're like, well, how are we going to take the truck driver who loses his job, he's been doing it for 30 years, and retrain him to be a cloud engineer? That's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. What will happen is all the job categories will notch up one or two, right? And there's going to be slightly more complex jobs available in every area, right? It's just like, so the classic example is bank tellers. It's actually a really interesting case history. So the ATM machines came out in the 1980s, and everyone was like, my gosh, the bank tellers are all going to lose their jobs. And it didn't happen. In fact, the number of bank tellers continued to increase, albeit at a slower rate. Why? It's super fascinating. It's a great case history. Because in every branch, the simplest deposits and withdrawals were taken care of by the ATM, it required fewer tellers per branch, which lowered the break even to open a branch in the first place because there's a lower cost, which means that the banks could open branches in almost every neighborhood, whereas before they were only in city centers. So today there's way more branches, but they have fewer tellers per branch, but more overall, and those tellers are doing more complicated transactions, like they're depositing checks from whatever, China or United Arab Emirates or whatever it is. You're doing more interesting type things. Well, that's going to happen in every area, right? Now, I can't be naive and say that all of those people are going to be absorbed through that process, because that's not, like, for example, travel agents is exactly the opposite. As online usage has gone up, number of travel agents has gone down, period. They're gone. There are some left, but it's a small fraction of what they used to be. So the question is, in your industry, you can think in your industry, are we going to be like bank tellers, or are we going to be like travel agents? And again, these are thought experiments to help you get your head around it. But overall, there's no question that we're going to see a surge of people lose their jobs. And it's ironic because right now, we have the lowest unemployment that we've had in 60 years. It's kind of like in the trucking industry. In the trucking industry right now, there's a huge shortage of truck drivers. Huge shortage. There's literally bidding wars to get drivers. Meanwhile, in 7 years, even 5 years, It's going to be completely 180 degrees the opposite way. And I'll tell you another thing. I know I go on tangents. This is because I get really excited about this stuff. But so people, we always assume that it's going to be the way it is now, just slightly different. Sometimes it's totally different. So when you have hub-to-hub trucking, where you're going from a hub outside of Houston to a hub outside of Oklahoma City, right? And then you got the last mile. So someone's going to take the truck from the hub into the city. Well, does it need to be someone local within that community? Not at all. It can be an office park in Boise, Idaho, where all the cubicles have TV cameras all around, or TV screens all around, and a steering wheel and brake and pedal, and all the controls inside the truck, and they just tap into the truck outside of Oklahoma, drive it into the final mile, leave it there, then hit the button. Now they're in Virginia doing the same thing for another truck, and now they're in, God knows where next, right? So, like, all those drones that we hear about, those aren't being flown in Yemen, they're being flown in Houston, right? And so it makes sense that that's probably going to happen again in trucking. So anyway, like, there's going to, I'm going to jump around again just quickly. So the election, right? Donald Trump wins the election. And I don't care, politically I'm agnostic, so don't worry, I'm making no judgment on him. But he won, in part, many reasons, in part because a percentage of the population is really frustrated with the way the economy is working. They feel like they're left behind. And those people predominantly voted for Donald Trump. Okay? That percentage will grow. Right? The number of people who are frustrated will grow. Even now, we have a very low unemployment rate, but there's a lot of people in our economy who have a job, but it's not the job they want. Right? They used to have a job paying $35 an hour at a factory. Now they're making $19.50. Right? So they have a job, but are they happy with the job? Not really. So, and that frustration is going to add volatility to our political system, right? Because people will point, whenever you have a surplus of anything, like surplus information, people will gravitate to the edges because there's more than they can consume anyway. So they have to consume a subset of the total. So if they're on the left, you're going to consume only left stuff. If you're on the right, you're going to consume only right stuff. And it just puts things further and further apart. That's going to get worse before it gets better. I don't know that it'll ever get better, frankly. Now, Trump's kind of a unique character. I'm not convinced that someone with his same personality profile is going to come up. I don't think those people are that common, frankly. But we're going to see a lot of volatility. Anyway, I know I've gone all over the place on your question, but the new business models will emerge. Entrepreneurs will find a way to take advantage of excess capacity. And if we have excess capacity with human beings, there are entrepreneurs that are going to come in and figure out a way to take advantage of that excess capacity. And it's worth noting that over the past 100 years, the countries that adopted technology the fastest were also the countries that had the lowest unemployment rate on average. So, I'm convinced, human beings are incredible, unbelievable. And if there's slack in the line, if there's a bunch of people who are unemployed, someone will come up with a business model that will absorb those people. They may not be making as much money as they were, but they'll be able to do something. Just like the Uber drivers today. That's incredible. What these people, the guy who drove me from the airport yesterday makes $200 a day. He drives until he's made $200, and then he goes home for the night. That's all he does. And he does it 6 days a week. So that's $1,200 a week, and he usually gets a $200 bonus. So he's making like $70,000 a year, which isn't that bad. I was like, good for you. Now, his job's gone in 6 years. It's gone, okay? But the bottom line is something else will come up, and I have no idea what it's going to be. I'm willing to bet it's going to be higher levels of service, done for you kinds of stuff, right? Gig economy kind of task-rabbit stuff, like I'll paint your house, I'll do your grocery shopping, like whatever it is. There's going to be more of those sorts of things happening, but it will be a wild ride,
So
for sure.
A question on that then. So the room is full of educators,
Yeah.
people preparing people for those jobs. So what a challenge then in the face of disruption of knowing, well, what are we trained for? The
Yeah.
life cycle or the cycle time for business is a fraction of what it is for an educational institution. What guidance do you have?
Yeah.
Are we training generalists? Are we are we going super narrow and super deep?
Yeah, so I'm gonna answer my question with my opinion. And I'm telling you right now, some of you will disagree with my opinion, and that's okay. I respect the other side. But I think education is like so ripe for disruption, it's incredible. Like, it's just, there's almost nothing about it that's working properly today. There's so many areas where it's broken. The problem is no one's come up with anything that is as good as what we have. Like online, watching videos, the retention's 0. The online learning, like University of Phoenix or whatever, I'm not saying University of Phoenix is bad, but that learning model, retention rates are very, very low. So at the end of the whole thing, you're not left with nearly the kind of comprehensive understanding that you would have in another environment. But something's going to come along. Now, what we are seeing is especially, okay, this is fascinating. Sometimes people say, like, what education do you have to stand up there and talk about artificial intelligence? Well, up until like a year or two ago, there basically were no education programs about artificial. It's a brand new thing. Like blockchain is brand new. I mean, there was some in specialty fields, but for the most part, those education didn't exist. Well, that's happening more and more and more, right? You think about social media marketing. Like when social media marketing managers were first started being hired, they didn't have a degree in it at all. There was no degree, right? Now there's a degree in social media, so there's a lag, right? So what's happening is the companies are searching for skills rather than education, milestones. And if they find the right skill set or the right attitude, they're training themselves. On-site trainings, and Google, my gosh, Google is training their people. It's incredible, some of the educational facilities. It's not just Google. Microsoft, Accenture, they all have like schools. Like I did this 3 sessions for SAP they have their innovation days, which are education. So anyway, companies will come in and it's going to be on-the-fly stuff, like something that's brand new. They just start doing it 2 weeks ago, and they got some early traction. They'll start training their own people. So I think the role of education could easily shift from educational institutions to companies themselves.
Okay.
So
we have time for one more question, and then know that,
and I'll be back later.
that Patrick's going to be back later. Another question? Anyone?
Yes, we got 2.
Okay.
Do we have a mic,
up
or
to
just
you.
yell it out? I'm good either way. We got
Here we
a
go.
mic coming.
Adrian is going to help.
Just so everyone else can hear it too.
Right. So technology, innovation, growth, all the things that you're talking about. What about the impact that legislation has on all of the possibilities of those technologies? Look at the Uber driver situation where they're trying to unionize and create legislation around it so that it becomes a different type of a job from the Uber model.
Yeah.
So how does that impact everything?
Yeah, these are brilliant questions. So the Uber thing, number one, legislation is a lagging indicator as well. Like they're reacting, by definition they're reacting. So when something becomes an issue, then there's a need to legislate around it. But the legislation, so let's just take the Uber example as a specific example, and then I'll circle back. So unionizing the drivers and benefits and all the things that are being talked about, right? What does that do? It raises the cost for drivers, which increases the financial incentive to get rid of drivers altogether. So indirectly, that legislation accelerates their demise. So maybe they have a better deal for 3 years and then it's all over. Because Uber can't wait. And it's not that they're an evil company, although some would argue. But they have a very aggressive approach. Compare them to Lyft, for example. Lyft has less of that kind of, but Lyft, sorry, I shouldn't have even gotten into that, but Lyft is actively letting Uber fight the battles, and they just kind of sneak in behind. So, so it's kind of, they're probably both equally evil or good or whatever, it doesn't matter. But the point is, and this is true for every, okay, so you go from every trend, like if you're following trends, is basically what I do every day, and you pan out as far as you can, what's the prevailing trend that seems to be everywhere? Decentralization, right? Things are decentralizing, right? And the only exception to that is technology platform creators, they're centralizing. So like, Google and Facebook and Apple are more powerful than many governments around the world. Like they are incredibly powerful. And imagine, they're all located right here. It's stunning, the power that's right here in Northern California that's projected across the entire world is absolutely insane. But everything else is becoming decentralized. So we used to have centralized media. Today we have completely decentralized media. We used to have, and still do, centralized power production. Now we have solar panels on millions of roofs all across the economy. That's a decentralized energy production process. And now there's platforms coming up where neighborhoods can sell their excess energy within themselves and not even touch the grid. What's that going to lead to? That's going to lead to eventually no grid at all, right? Which is going to be way more decentralized. And we used to have centralized taxis. Now we have Uber. We used to have centralized hotels. Now we have Airbnb. Like everywhere you look, there's this decentralization taking place, right? Where people are more and more kind of on their own, more fragmented, more tribal, right? We see that playing out in the politics, among other places, and media. Like media, it's not like one person says this is fake news and the other people don't say that. They're all saying fake news. They're just pointing in different directions, right? They're all like, we've got ours right, that's fake news. I mean, which one's right, which one's wrong? And so what you end up with in a decentralized world is a world where you have competing truths. You don't just have one truth, you have multiple truths because we have surplus information. Like if you want to believe that the earth is flat, believe it or not, there's evidence out there to suggest that. And so people who stay in that ecosystem are convinced that the earth is flat, which is insane, right? And there's all sorts of it, like the vaccine debate is another one that's kind of similar. So that whenever you have that, and now I've completely forgotten your question.
So how about this? You ended on leadership, that it takes leadership.
Yeah.
So the call to action here is?
All right, so the biggest thing, and so you guys have heard this before, biggest thing is fail fast, fail forward. Who here follows Tim Ferriss, the 4-Hour Work Week? Right, interesting guy. Again, some people like him, some people don't, but he talks about the minimum viable product. So my innovation equals budgeting failure. So the question is, when you have an idea, what is the simplest way you can test the concept of that idea, right? It's not about taking big experiments. Like, do the smallest thing possible. Like, there are people out there, there are companies out there that are marketing products that don't even exist just to see if it has traction. And if it does has traction, then they build it. Can I tell one more quick story?
Do we have time for one more story? All right.
I promise it'll be super quick.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So think about your most expensive product that you're selling, or service that you're selling today. Take the price of it and multiply it by 10. What could you sell at that price? Or what would need to be included for that price to be a great deal? And then, so people say, what if nobody buys it? Who cares if anybody buys it? No one needs to know. You're developing the opportunity to market it. That's the value, right? So I was coming back from Munich, and I was on the plane, and I was sitting beside this guy who owns 33% of a company that makes these really high-end industrial microscopes. And I was talking to him, and I get all excited, because that's what I do. And I told him, what's the most expensive product you have? And he said, it's about $100,000, $100,000 microscope. And he was actually in Germany helping with an install of someone who had purchased that microscope. And I was like, okay, what could you sell at $1 million? And immediately he's like, starts thinking. I'm like, what needs to be included? And I was like, look, do you know what you would like to include in the microscopes in the next 4, 5, 6 years in your own company? He's like, oh yeah, we've got a list a mile long of things we want to include in future microscopes. I'm like, okay, so you know what would need to be included. You have them, you already know what they are. And he's like, what if nobody buys it? I'm like, I don't care if nobody buys it. You don't have to actually build one. Just get the specs and the drawings and do a rendering of something that's virtual and slap it all over your website so that people look at your website and they know that you're the company that sells the $1 million microscope. It's a different frame. It's a different frame. It's frame control. That's what branding is all about. Look at Donald Trump versus Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush is a good guy. He completely collapsed in the face of Trump because Trump had the bigger frame. Right? Like him or hate him, he had a bigger frame, he had a bigger personality. Jeb Bush couldn't man up to that for whatever reason. And I'm not criticizing Jeb, but it was a frame differential between the two. That's why it's so hard to negotiate with Donald Trump, because he comes in like a huge tank, right? And you've got like a slingshot. It's just no contest. So anyway, I told him, I'm like, put the $1 million microscope on your website and just have it there. Anyway, we exchanged numbers. Like 6 months later, he sends me an email, and he's like, He said, we sold one. And it was, I think it was Lawrence Livermore Lab. I'm not sure. I'm not certain because he didn't want to say, but he kind of said some things that made me think. The bottom line is, like, get your 10x product or service and slap it all over your website and tell everybody that it's available, and don't worry if nobody buys it. It doesn't matter. You're just changing the frame of your business. And when you do that, you become the leader by default. The only requirement in leadership is to lead. Like, do something that no one else is doing. There, you did it. You're a leader. Nothing else is required. Just do something. You know, anyway.
Everybody, please join me in thanking Patrick.
Thank you very much. This is, and then I'll grab my water. Thank you.
Thank you. So he is going to be back, and Patrick, love your passion, but your insights are just incredible. So this is where we want to engage you. So everybody have their smartphone out. So Evan Schmidt, the Senior Director for Valley Vision, is going to come out, and she's going to walk you through how we can use technology to get you involved. So, Evan, please, tell us what we need to do.
All right, thanks, Bill. All right, does everyone have their phone? Get it out, hold it up, and then put it back down again. And then open your text messaging app. And this poll is going to be something that you text into. There's instructions on the next slide, if we could advance. There we go. So you're going to text the word future focus to the number 22333. So to break that down, first you'll put in the number to your to box in a new text message, 22333. And then stop. Listen to my instructions before you start typing future focus, because there's something really important. And that is, there's no space between future and focus. It's going to be one word. Your phone is going to want to autocorrect. We got to be smarter than our phones and say, no, don't do it. And make sure it's one word, because it'll take you to a completely different poll if it's two words. So once you've done that, and I'll give you a second because I told you not to start yet. The text message will give you back a message that says, you've joined Evan Schmidt's session Future Focus. So why don't you raise your hand if you're seeing that message? So smart. Not that you're not so smart if you're not. You'll get there. Okay, is anybody having a problem? Because we also have people who can come and help you. And if you get a different message, like you've entered Rick so-and-so's poll, then you're going to want to type leave and try it again. All right, are we ready to go? Okay, so the next, don't click the hyperlink on there or anything. Your next step is going to be to text in the answer to our multiple choice question. And Emma's working on setting that up.
Okay. Thanks, Evan. All right. So those of you who aren't quite on yet, please look at your table mates and hopefully they'll give you a hand. How many folks do you think we're ready? Okay. So I'm going to walk you through two questions. The first one is, will technology disruption help or harm the Sacramento region's economy? A, it'll help. It'll drive innovation. B, it's a bit of a mixed bag. There'll be winners and losers. C, it's really going to harm. It's going to disrupt and really come to hurt people. And D, I don't know. So we're going to hold it open for about a minute. I'll give you a bit of a warning before the end. And what's kind of cool is as people weigh in, you'll see the numbers shift. By the way, all of these results, we'll send it back out to you by email after our meeting today. Has everybody weighed in? So 5-second warning. All right. So your answer is 73% say that it is a mixed bag. But many of you are also optimistic that it's going to drive innovation. So all of us are incredibly smart because we all know. We don't not know, right? But we know. So what's our next question? What types of technology do you think will be the most disruption to jobs in the future? Automation, artificial intelligence, blockchain, like Patrick told us about, or something else? Okay, another 5 seconds or so for everybody to weigh in. All right, I think that's probably a lock. So you said artificial intelligence by 47%, 48% is going to be the most disruptive. Second, automation. And third, blockchain. Anybody surprised by these results? So the next thing that we want to do is we want to move on and invite some experts to the floor with me. Let's invite them up. So in your program, you can follow along as well. But we have, pardon me as I get the right script. So we have, as part of our panel, A.J. Jacobs, who's the Chief Information Security Officer for SMUD. We have Kevin McGrew, the Director of Quality Management at Siemens, and Christy Griffin, the Head of Talent Management and Strategy at Stanford Healthcare. So good to see you. Hi, very good to see you. Very good to see you. All right. So, each and every one of them has their own mic. Emma, I'm going to give you this. All right. So in your program, we have a bit of a bio on each one of them. I'm going to start with Kevin. And what we've asked them to do is to do a brief introduction of themselves, and then answer the question at the same time, how technology is sort of changing your business or your business model.
Okay. Hello, my name is Kevin McGrew, and I am the Director of Quality Management at Siemens Mobility, Inc. here in Sacramento. We are a manufacturer of rail-bound transit vehicles for the North American market. We are Siemens' only facility building trains in all North America. And business is booming. It's a great time to be building trains, at least the ones we're doing in our markets, and I can talk a little bit about that when we answer the questions. But I am responsible for quality management, so all projects, all platforms, making sure we provide safe, reliable, high-quality vehicles produced in our facility here in Sacramento by 1,500 men and women. What's the big focus for our business? It is, we're not building your grandfather's and your grandmother's trains anymore. These are rolling computers. There are hundreds of microprocessors on a train, and they're all spitting out information. And the crazy thing about our business is our competition is not other car builders. Our competition is a company that's going to come along and figure out how to harness all that information and provide more safe and reliable transportation to our customers. We're talking Google, we're talking Amazon Web Services, so it's a completely different world out there.
Wow. So AJ.
Thanks. Hi, I'm AJ Jacobs. I am the Chief Information Security Officer at SMUD. I've been with SMUD for approximately 6 months. I'm new to the area. I'm coming from consulting. My area of the business obviously is the protection of SMUD's data and infrastructure from a cybersecurity standpoint. I imagine technology is challenging all the models of our business, but one that's close to me is our technology and our data, and primarily focusing on data. It's a fantastic talk by Patrick, because all those things that he spoke of resonated with me and my business model and what I'm doing for SMUD.
Fantastic. And Christy, and by the way, we're happy you're here, which was not necessarily an easy thing today.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you so much. It's good to see you, Bill, and all these lovely faces. Hello, are we doing well? All right. You haven't stood in a while, but I'm sure you're okay. You'll stand if you need to. So I'm Christy Griffin. I'm currently the head of talent management at Stanford Healthcare. I spent 15 years, as you can see from my bio, in high tech, and have been in healthcare for 4. And my, what a difference. It has its challenges, it's very complex, and technology absolutely contributes to that. And it's definitely disrupting our model. We're in the process of building a new hospital. It's actually built. We open at the end of this year. And we have really exciting things and new technology, like we have robotics, we have robots doing surgery. How technology is disrupting and changing healthcare is that from a talent perspective, which is my focus, very similar to what Patrick talked about, we have to think about the type of person we're hiring. So it's really changing the talent landscape. We do have to hire people that are adaptable and agile and are willing to use technology. Working at a place like Google, if I can paint a very quick picture, you're literally in your office with your giant beanbag, sitting on the floor with your whiteboard on the floor, and you're engaging with your peers, and you're just throwing ideas out there. You're changing offices every 5 days. You may be switched to a different business unit. You're moving to a different part of campus. You have an idea that you create an outline for and a proposal, and you demonstrate the ROI, and they say go do it and throw money at it. You have a $1,500 budget to decorate your office space. So it's constant, different types of creativity happening all the time. In a space like healthcare, that's not the case. You have people that have been in healthcare for their entire career, 30 plus years, that are excellent at their craft. And here we come with things like electronic medical records and robotics, and they're like, no, I don't know that I want to work anymore. I'm going to retire. So, which is very, very real. So it's really disrupting the talent landscape and who we're looking to hire, because they have to be willing to engage with technology. They have to understand that this is where we are in life. And you have to embrace it in order for us to move our business model forward.
So AJ, did you want to jump on that?
I wanted to add to, hello?
Yep.
I want to add to that. I think we're experiencing the same thing at SMUD in terms of technology. As I said, I just started, and one of my big things is that I'm looking to recruit talent in cybersecurity. And what I'm finding is that, I have to keep up with talent that is, one, educated, and to Patrick's point, a lot of the technology that's been introduced, such as the AI, there's a people element behind that. And we need to be able to understand that there are people involved in actually integrating that technology and actually configuring that technology. So it's very important that we also pay attention to that from our technology hires and see how the education is evolving and those emerging technologies are coming into play, and how that's affecting our workforce development and our recruitment.
Yep. So either advice to this room or the advice that you offer your own kids. So how do you prepare for a disruptive economy?
So I was talking to one of my colleagues, I think she's here today, and she gave me an interesting statistic. She said 65% of children entering primary school today will likely be in roles that do not currently exist in the workforce. And
AJ, can you say that one more time?
that will likely be in roles that do not exist in the current workforce. 65%. And that's pretty fascinating. I look back, I have a master's in cybersecurity, and when I look back to actually exploring to get a master's in cybersecurity, that degree did not exist. And to Patrick's point, a lot of the foundational knowledge within that degree came from things that already existed. But to his point, critical thinking, problem solving, all those things are what I would push towards instilling into your children and preparing for future work assignments.
Christy, how would you answer that? And then,
Do you want me to go first?
yeah.
Okay.
please.
Okay, advice. I have 4 kids, and they're all different ages. So I have a 21-year-old that's a junior in college, she's just finishing up. I have a 17-year-old who's a junior in high school. And then we took a break and lost our minds in between, and we have 2 little ones. They're fantastic, by the way. We have a 10-year-old daughter who's a 4th grader, and we have a 2-year-old. Oh, thank goodness, no, not a 2-year-old. A 10-year-old who's a 4th grader and a 2nd grader, a boy who's 8 years old. So 2 boys, 2 girls, at very different stages in life and that need very different guidance, right? My daughter's going to complete next year, but she wants to be a nurse. And so thinking about the types of nursing that is still going to exist in the future. So the one thing that I will call out is that technology is exciting and it's disruptive and scary at the same time. But when I think about healthcare, and I also think about my primary profession in recruitment and talent, there's a human element that will just never go away. A robot or AI can never touch someone in the way that a human does, can never understand the socioeconomic factors that are contributing to why someone might feel a certain emotion. They can't certainly close a deal like I can, I'll tell you. So that human connection and that human element will never, never go away. When technology is at its finest, it's when it's taking away all the stuff that we don't want to do, the running algorithms, all of the analyzation, the pieces that help us do our job better, and we get to do the human things. The advice that I would give is that we have to figure out, and this is a tough, tough challenge. My passion and the piece that we need to figure out is, what do we do with everyone in the K through 12 space? How do we evolve education? How do we partner with technology companies to make sure that they're invested in the K through 12 space, not just at the private schools where people can fund, where parents can afford to fund their education at the highest levels, but at the public schools in some of our low-income areas where we have kids that are coming out that don't have the access and the opportunity to learn and to grow new skills at the pace that technology is moving. How do we fix that problem? Because we have this large population, next-gen kids that by the time they get out, they're not going to have opportunities in the space that they thought they would.
Christy, I'm not sure if I'd call building trains a parallel technology to healthcare, but listen up, I've got an idea. So Siemens has had a very successful run of business selling trains. We're sitting on a $2.5 billion backlog with 900 vehicles that we've sold and not yet built. We're in a fantastic situation to go out and hire people. And this is very much a traditional manufacturing environment. It's short-run, complex manufacturing that is a long ways away from automating. So we have 300 welders. We have 400 electrical and electromechanical assemblers. And years ago, we figured out, let's partner Siemens along with our partner, Akara Solutions, figured out, let's go out to our community college and develop programs. We've got a welding program at American River College that is a capstone program. We donated equipment, we provide instructors, and I think Brian King is actually here today, and I would like to just throw a shout out to him. That's a great program, has been very successful. We figured out it was not enough. So we started figuring out what else can we do. We found a lot of other manufacturers out there that were struggling with the same problem we did. And what we did is we came together as manufacturers and we created Sacramento Valley Manufacturing Initiative, which is basically going into the K through 12 environment and promoting advanced manufacturing degrees, quite frankly, in some cases to underserved communities. And I want to tell you, I don't want to take a psychology degree away from anyone. But what I'm looking at is helping a student from a family that maybe doesn't have the means go into advanced manufacturing as a welder. Join a company like Siemens where you have tuition reimbursement. Get a degree, build a career, And that's what we're doing. And Sacramento Valley Manufacturing Initiative is trying to raise the level for every a child in our community that's interested in advanced manufacturing. And I think Dean Peckham, our executive director, is here today.
Dean, can you raise your hand?
If anyone's interested in SVMI after the talk, please come and talk to Dean or myself.
And manufacturing is on the rise. There's, as you've just said, there's hundreds of jobs that are going unfilled.
100 of manufacturers, and frankly, Siemens, we do have the name. Everybody's heard of us. We build a splashy product. But there's manufacturers doing incredible things throughout this region, and they don't have access to a pipeline of employees unless we build it ourselves.
Yep. So how important is it for students to actually have a taste of what it's like to work at SMUD, or to work in a healthcare environment, for them to sort of really understand the relevance of how school or training, sort of connects to work? How important is that sort of being in the field with you?
I think any exposure early on is very important. I know SMUD has some really great programs through internships even at the high school level to college. We also have Bring Your Child to Work Day, which I'm actually participating in next month, and hosting all the kids to come into our Security Operations Center, because that's usually the coolest thing about cyber these days, is the big screens and watching all the vulnerabilities that exist around. I think early exposure is very important. I think even much so in the cybersecurity workforce, you'll see that the president just released an executive order on cybersecurity workforce development. There's a shortage globally in cybersecurity. I think the demand was 3 billion or 3 million, I think it was 3 million jobs needed globally, and it was 500,000 just alone in the United States. And you think we live in an area like where San Jose and San Francisco, the Silicon Valley, you think that's where the demand is, but we actually have a huge demand with, as you heard, AI, understanding cloud technology. Many of you are using cloud technology right now and you don't know it. Your kids certainly know it, and it's showing them the back parts of that, and the early exposure of how that works in the work environment, I think is key to getting their interest into our areas of need.
Right. Christy.
Yeah, speaking of, my daughter came home and she was like, Mom, do you want me to show you my Google Drive account? She's 10. And she opens it up and there's like 10 presentations and, some documents that she had written in school, and I had no idea. I'm an involved parent, I promise you, but yeah, they're using it and you don't even know it. So how critical is it to get exposure? It's critical. I was never exposed to the healthcare space growing up because there was no one in my circle that was a doctor or a nurse or even a medical assistant. And so I had no idea that careers like that existed. And now being able to share and create programs in my role, I run our summer internship program and our shadow program, and I was able to expand it this year, on a smaller scale. Obviously for some of the larger companies, the numbers sound small, but we expanded from 20 students to 60 students. And we brought it down to high school level all the way up to the graduate level. And we focused on partnering with local Eastside Prep School, where 95% of the people that go there are people of color. It's a high school, and 100% of them are first generation in their family go to college. And so I was able to open it up for exposure for them. And it's critical because you get a chance to figure out, do I really want to do this? Oh, I want to be a nurse. Do I really want to be a nurse? I don't know. Maybe I want to be a rad tech instead, and my gosh, they're in high demand, right? So it's really great. They get exposure, and you get to walk a day in the life. And I remember coming out of college, I wanted to be a CEO one day. I had no idea what that meant. My dad was an educator. My mom was a tennis pro and player. And so I said I wanted to be CEO, and then I start my job as a consultant with Deloitte. And I'm like, wait a second. I'm sitting in a cube. I'm wearing a suit, and we don't have to wear suits anymore. And I get to go online and do some trainings. Oh my gosh, is this what I worked so hard for? No idea, because I never had an internship. So I think it's critical because it really shapes the direction that you think you want to go, but you actually get real exposure to what it looks like.
Great. All right. So let me ask a new question. So futurists, sort of looking backwards, say that business has changed radically over time. So if you go back maybe 30, 40 years ago, there was lots of strata in the organization. You had the CEO, and then you had senior management, and then middle management, and then you had managers managing other managers, and then you had the frontline troops. And now, over that period of time, that whole rank of middle management is gone, and our organizations are very flat. And so the people that are working on the front lines are people that have to self-manage, right? And that's sort of our challenge, is that we're basically putting them in positions and saying, and oh, by the way, we want you to solve the problem, and we don't know exactly how to do it. As managers, that's your job to sort of figure that out. So the challenge today is not only being technically competent, it's also having what we no longer call soft skills. We call it 21st century skills, right? So critical thinking, the ability to do problem solving. So is that something that you're expecting education and workforce training programs to deliver, or is that the responsibility of employers to deliver?
Well, that's a great question, and it kind of goes back to a point that was in Patrick's presentation, budget to fail. 90% of the time, you're not going to hit that 100 times win that he talked about. And I'm a quality guy. Budget to fail, are you nuts? I mean, no, we want to win all the time, and we want to have great quality. But it ties in with a skill that is very critical, and it can be taught, and that is resilience. And that is, you're going to fail a lot, and they may be small failures, and they may be hopefully inconsequential, but you're going to learn through those. And there's a couple of ways we go about that. One is we do simulations, and the students in high school, they're using Creo, they're using SolidWorks, they're building in three-dimensional space what they're going to eventually build. And so that modeling is a key part of it. And then the other part is, as teams, really assessing each other, and that is a soft skill, being open and clear to each other. I think both of those can easily be taught, but they need to be honed and trained and allowed to flourish in a company.
Mm-hmm.
That's a tough one for me. As I said, I'm new to SMUD, but SMUD, I think, is pretty organized in that fashion to manage frontline management. You have fleet representation all the way up to the CEO. But my exposure throughout the workforce, coming from consulting with Booz Allen Hamilton, I do see that the need for emotional intelligence and being able to understand diversity in thought and really take the time to understand what's actually being presented from very different angles, and having the respect to allow your mind to go on pause and allow that to come to the table to create a more diverse solution, and look at a problem very differently, and know that you can give more to your company or to the world even by allowing that to occur. I don't have any kids. But I imagine that's a challenge, just raising children to think that way, because it's definitely a challenge in the workforce. Mm-hmm. And some people have it and some people don't. I think some people can be trained to a certain level, but I think there should always be a strong emphasis on supporting diversity in thought and inclusion.
Yeah.
I was serious. You can borrow some if you'd like. Some or two. So to answer your question, I think that there's several responsible parties to teach the soft skills or the 21st century skills, but I'll call out three. Critical thinking, agility, and communication. I think it starts at home through your natural experiences or your life experiences. I think it's, you put kind of more programming around that in education. And then I think it's continued honing when you're in a work environment. And the three that I called out, critical thinking, agility, and communication, are so important when it comes to just your interaction in life and then in work as well. I try to ask my kids questions and understand their thought processes, and we do this when we interview people as well. We ask open-ended questions just to understand how people think and how they problem solve. Because they have to be able to navigate, you have to be able to navigate life and work and relationships and tough business problems. You have to be agile, especially with changing technology and it disrupting so much of what we do. You have to have the ability to be agile and adapt. And then communication, this is something we talk about a lot. In this era in which we live, we're constantly looking down. We could be sitting on the couch, all 6 of us, and just be looking at our phones and engaging with Snapchat or Instagram or watching, the Warriors win last night on our phones. Woo! Go Warriors. But we can all be sitting there in the same room. Or I watch my 17-year-old, he'll have friends over, and they'll all be up in his room just lounging around and sitting on their phones and not even talking to each other or texting each other when they're sitting in the same room. And so it's so important to remind our children that they have to actually look up and speak to people, and then they have to be able to navigate complex situations, not just the technology that's disrupting our lives, but actually navigating people, and that requires critical thinking and communication.
Mm-hmm. Great question. So we want to field your questions now. So what questions do you have for our panelists? And just by a raise of hands, and we have some mic rovers here. Any questions? Okay, so while you're preparing, I have another question. So we're talking a lot about not just, quote unquote, the hardware of organizations, right? The structures and policies. We're also talking about the software, the culture. So what are the cultural traits of your businesses that are going to enable you to be successful?
So I just recently participated in a team building exercise with a foundation called Emergenetics. I don't know if anybody's heard of that company. It's almost like a Myers-Briggs. So we did that with our large functional team, and they all have different types of personality traits. And what's fascinating about it is it breaks you into these 4 different areas of, I think it's analytical, structural, I can't think of the other 2. Mm-hmm. But it was fascinating. They divided us up into 2 different groups, and within those 2 different groups, they gave us a challenge. And we all had to actually see how each other thought and build something. And it was a pretty rewarding experience for me to see my staff and how they interacted to solve a problem, and how some did not interact with others to solve a problem. So I think culturally, it's a very important part of culture. Again, I'm going to go back to that diversity of thought and being able to be agile and understand change and what it can do for an organization. Like healthcare, what I'm hearing, it sounds like that SMUD also has a high tenure. People have been in the industry for 33 years doing their jobs, and when change is coming as fast as Patrick noted, it's very important that we're able to approach these problems with the old and the new, and be able to see where we can leverage each other's thoughts and way of approaching problems.
Yep.
Okay, that's, so culture. I've been with Siemens for 32 years. I've been here in Sacramento with Siemens for 20 years. Siemens has been around for 170, by the way. But that's no guarantee for success, as Patrick said. You saw how many companies can lose their way very quickly. Tradition or winning helps everything. I will tell you that. That's if your company, if your organization is successful, man, that is good. But sometimes you don't learn as well when you're winning. And we've had a lot of success in our organization. We've won a lot of contracts. You never want to take our customers and their business for granted. So it is a challenge to really stay hungry. We do that by having a very low structure. We're very not very hierarchical, certainly in the Siemens way of doing things. We try to get together. We try to celebrate our successes. We try to work together when we failed. But there's a lot of challenges there. And I think our company, even that we could be better. I tell you one thing I'm going to do. We have a lot of situations where it's a few people talking and a lot of people listening, and I'm definitely going to start doing that online. I'm going to get with your team here afterwards. I'm going to do that online polling. I think that's a great way to get everybody involved.
I have to say that the law firm of Downey Brand, which is based here in Sacramento, I know it well because my boss is the managing director there. He is responsible for managing over 100 attorneys, moving in one direction. And interestingly, he uses the same technology we're using in this room during his staff meetings to ask questions and to get sort of direction. And it's proven highly effective, very democratic, and frankly, a way of getting some stuff in the room that otherwise wouldn't get in the room.
I just wanted to add, I noticed a very strong presence of collaboration and relationships within SMUD as a big part of their culture, and also obviously community relationships and leveraging those as well.
Yeah.
So at Stanford Healthcare, we launched a tool through the Marcus Buckingham Company called Standout last July, and essentially it gives you your standout profile. So is anyone in the room familiar with Gallup and StrengthsFinder? So Marcus Buckingham left and started his own company, the Marcus Buckingham Company, and it basically gives you your two standout profiles. And so mine is Stimulator Pioneer. Stimulators, I can feel the energy in the room, and I like to make sure it's raised at a high level. Imagine that. And Pioneer, I'm a future thinker, so I'm the disruptor. I come in and I challenge the status quo and I make people uncomfortable, but I also get them back on track and help them understand what the future is going to look like. Very appropriate. So I think at Stanford, we start with self-awareness, understanding who you are by your standout strengths. Every employee is required to take it, clinical, non-clinical, all the way from our housekeepers all the way to the CEO. And then we have check-ins every single week. And so you start with understanding self, and then understanding the team dynamics, and then how that impacts your work.
That's fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, so we have a question in the rear.
Good afternoon, or morning still. My name is James Stewart. I'm a 22-year retiree from Reader's Digest. 2 years ago, on the cover of a National Geographic magazine were 5 humans and the progression to the most current human, and that human was partially robot. What human skills are we going to see change with all of the other great changes that are going on? Will we have to adapt mechanically rather than just trusting the robot to do it? $6 million man, in other words.
What was the last part? You said, well, we have to adapt, and what did you say after that?
With all of the changes, will we become a $6 million man, woman, because we will have to be quicker, better, and smarter? Please, I see Kevin wants to respond.
Well, usually in a different venue when I'm talking with my manufacturing colleagues or I'm trying to get kids excited, I say our robot is bigger than your robot. We have a robot that is a football field long and as tall as this ceiling. It's big, and it welds the sidewalls of the trains together. And so we've got some amazing technology there. But I think the thing that is really going to impact us is augmented reality. My kids got really excited a couple of summers ago when the Go Pokemon or Pokemon Go thing happened. And I looked at that and I said, you know, if I could have my quality instructions in their field of view so they can show this is what you have to make sure you do, that's the $6 million man. Augmented reality, giving everybody a view of what they're supposed to be doing right as they're doing it. We're a ways away from that, but I can tell you that is coming. Our train is already completely built virtually, So why not train our people on building it before they ever build it, and have those goggles or those glasses where it's augmented reality when they're actually doing it. So it's coming.
So blurring the lines between,
Yeah, using
Human and
technology is actually becoming, superhuman.
okay. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, this is Luciana Radimski from KAI Partners, and a question I have in terms of the disruption of education and the future of certification-driven models. How comfortable are each of your companies with receiving individuals within reason, because certain positions demand a mandated certification by a certain body? How comfortable are you receiving people with a non-traditional pathway, which could expand the amount of diverse individuals who can bring into the fold? Like cybersecurity, you don't need a proper 2-year, 4-year education. You can certify your way to glory. It's exciting, but it might be daunting for those of us who have followed a traditional path.
Since you brought up cybersecurity, I will tell you some of the most talented cybersecurity professionals that I continue to learn from daily don't have a college education. High school diploma, very well apt on things, and some of them have augmented that education with certification just so they can have a basis of proof of knowledge when they come into an interview. I think, I was just writing up job recs this week. I'm hiring. And you have the desirable skills and you have the required skills, and obviously you have things within compliance that you have to comply with. And I found myself leaning more towards, the desired skills. And as I was looking through those desired skills, it actually answered a lot of your questions. I think when I look for staff in my field, I'm more interested to know how much they kept up. My degree was already obsolete when I got the paper. In terms of the technology now that I have to face and think about the securities that we are deploying for our company. So I think I have an open mind to it. I'm still learning about SMUD's acceptance of that type of attitude, but I think it's pretty open. I mean, I even look at around SMUD and talk to people who have been there for 30 plus years, and they haven't gone, say, in the same area for those 30 plus years. So I would think that the company has a huge appetite for that.
Okay, for time, so this is rapid fire round. Your advice, 30 seconds to this room about how to prepare to help you and your businesses with the pipeline of ready workers. What advice would you offer this room?
I have to go first? Okay. I would say, as educators, stay personally agile. You have to stay agile and relevant and engaged with technology, and you have to be able to prepare your students to do the same, because we move faster than you do, if I'm speaking to the educators in the room. By the time that, as Patrick talked about, we've moved on to a new technology, and you're still creating the curriculum for the current technology. So I would say, I know it's hard to challenge the system, and there's barriers in place today, but I think there's probably still things you can do within your curriculum to make sure you're staying agile and relevant and getting them prepared in ways that we can use in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would say be open-minded to challenging the approach or the fundamental curriculum. So say for example, if there are objectives of that particular course, and I'm speaking in terms of technology, I would say challenge the system to actually allow the generation that's coming through to challenge that, and not look at it as, I need this to get that job. And it kind of goes back to the question that was up in the front, is to say, how are we using this technology today? If I go through this course, I can get a job using this technology this way. But now we need to start thinking about the millennials. They want to be a part of something. They want to build something. They want to be a part of something inspirational. And I don't think there's many books that are going to teach them that. I think what it's going to do is give them the exposure, but now you have to look at how they're going to take that exposure and challenge the way that we live.
That's right. If we had a funny sitcom or a Kardashian involved in manufacturing, it would be a whole lot easier. But we don't. So I'm going to run the play that we've started with SVMI. It's getting close to the educators. It's taking existing programs and as quickly as possible showing them what the industry is doing, where we're headed, where can we help them, and reach out to those students that don't even know the opportunities that exist in manufacturing and will be our superstars in the future.
So I just thought of an example. So I can teach all of you, I can take you through a program and teach you all how to hack a system, but I can't teach you the thought process and why it's important to hack that system and the ways that you should hack it based on how you guys all use that system. So that's what I'm basically getting at, is to challenge the system itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's probably a great way to end. Please join me in thanking Christy, AJ, and Kevin. Really appreciate it. All right. Thanks a lot. I'll take that for you. Very good to see you. All right. We want to ask your opinion. So get out those smartphones. We're going to ask you some questions. We have a couple. Are we ready? Here we go. Okay, here's our first question for you. Is your company agency ready for big technology disruptions? I was a little bit troubled at first. I don't know if you were too. So A is not at all. B is, yeah, we've thought about it. C is, we're getting ready to get ready. We're well on our way, and then we're ready to go. So we'll hold this open for just another 5 seconds or so. Okay, thanks everybody for weighing in. So, the big winner here is, no, we're really not ready. So how does that make you feel? Based on everything that Patrick told us and what our panel told us about the coming disruption? So, a lot more work to be done. We have another question for you. So the next one is, what are the most important actions your company should take to get ready? Should you increase technology skills for your employees? B, should you increase the 21st century skills? And again, those used to be called soft skills or something else. We don't call those skills that anymore. We're talking about resiliency and empathy and critical thinking and problem solving. That's critical 21st century skills. C is putting technology at the center of the enterprise. That's going to help us. Rather than an afterthought, technology needs to be in the middle of the agency or the business. And D is none of the above. That those things are not the important things. Oh, forgive me. It's all of the above. We have to do it all. Sorry. Well, no wonder it's 66%, right? Okay. So we'll hold it open for another 5 seconds or so. And while that happens, I'm going to invite Patrick. You're still here, yes? Are you going to come up this side? Yes. So Patrick is going to join us, and I was hoping that he might have a bit of commentary on that last slide. Could we bring that? Is it possible that we can show that last slide again? So Patrick, what do you make of what the panelists said about this feedback?
So there was a slide that I had that talked about skills of the future, which were primarily creativity and communication. I think I said creativity and relationships, but relationships and communication to me are kind of the same. But it is remiss to ignore the obvious third one, which is to understand the language of technology, which boils down to things like statistics and code. I'm not suggesting everyone needs to know those things, but like I have two nephews, for example, and both of them are in software engineering. I mean, there's a good argument to suggest that those jobs could also get replaced by technology in the future. In fact, there's already today a lot of software is modularized and can be produced by other programs, whereas the people actually doing, the human beings involved are more on the design side, trying to figure out where all these modules come together. But the bottom line is, like, we should know the language. The statistics thing is interesting because the kind of, if you take mathematics to its extreme, say 30 years ago, you always ended up in calculus and that, in building bridges and in architecture, and that all boils down to physics and calculus. But then in the 90s, the focus really shifted from calculus to statistics. And now in our data-driven world and all the analytics, data analytics, digital transformation, that's all statistics driven. So a familiarity of statistics, is going to come in really handy when it comes to jobs of the future. But I don't know if that specifically addresses the question you had. I took a whole bunch of notes here.
Please.
But they're not necessarily in any particular order.
Well, so we probably have about 3 or 4 minutes.
Okay.
And if you wanted to sort of hit the highlights, that'd be great.
All right. So first and foremost, like, what's the most important, what's the number one thing that machine learning needs? Data, right? Data. More data is better. I mean, like, it's a linear thing. Like, the more data you have, the better the thing can learn. And so, like, for example, why did Facebook pay $19 billion for WhatsApp? They wanted the data. And the young kids were leaving Facebook because their parents were on it, so it wasn't cool. And so they went to Facebook, to WhatsApp, and so Facebook was like, we can't lose that demographic, so they bought WhatsApp, they bought Instagram. Boom, now they have the data. So everyone's racing after the data. That's why arguably Tesla has a big advantage when it comes to autonomous driving, not necessarily today, but let's say 5 years from now, because they've got way more data than anybody else. So, by like at least an order of magnitude. So they really have a significant advantage. So I just wanted to mention the data thing. That was one thing and I don't remember, I take these notes, someone says something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I never said this, so I write it down. And then I don't remember what it was that made me write it down. So I don't know what it was on the panel but I just wanted to, because I felt like I missed it the first time around. Second thing, like, what's the easiest thing you can do? And that relates to, like, what should we be doing to get ready for the future? And I know this is a little bit simplistic and arguably a little bit naive, but I work a lot with ERP companies, so Oracle and SAP and ERP or the ECM or whatever, EMC. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of them. They all have 3 letters. I don't know why. But they all say the same thing. They all say that the biggest challenge they have as enterprise software providers is that the vast majority of the people who buy their product only use a tiny fraction of what the thing's actually capable of doing. And it's like Microsoft Excel. Like, probably half the room thinks you're pretty darn, really familiar with Excel. But the reality is most people use, like, how many people actually use, like, pivot tables and and Visual Basic and all this and the macros and stuff. I'm sure some of you do, and that's awesome. But the average person doesn't know, the capabilities are there. They're just not using it. So the easiest thing in the SME space, the kind of mid-range. So in my business, like I do government work, and then I do the enterprise people, those are like W-2 audiences, and then you've got the SME kind of mid-range place, and those are 1099 audiences. That's how I perceive this audience, and I love these audiences because 1099s and W-2s are like different species of human beings, in my opinion. Like they just fundamentally think in different ways. So, and on the 1099, and that's a generalization, of course, but on the 1099 side, people think about like, how can I benefit from this opportunity rather than why should I be scared? And I fundamentally think that having that first approach is going to go a lot further. But anyway, in the SME space, that mid-range space, a lot of you have, so the number one thing you can do, in my opinion, is call your ERP provider and get them to send someone to train your people on how to better use the software you already have and you've already paid for. Like that's, in many cases, that's the lowest hanging fruit, is you've already got the technology. Like maybe you have a machine that can do all sorts of different things and you use like 4 of the capabilities, but there's like 26 that you haven't even touched. Well, just learning that, just getting training on what you've already, it doesn't really cost anything except maybe some training time. And quite often, like SAP, for example, when you pay, because you're paying a lot of money to implement SAP, and it includes training. And most people don't even take the training that they paid for, because they think that that's not the important part. My gosh, that's the most important thing you can do. And I have a buddy of mine up in Vancouver. I grew up in Vancouver, Canada. And he was working as a buyer at cable and wire and cable in the construction industry. Anyway, they implemented SAP, and he's just a left-brain guy, kind of like I am. And he just dug into it and geeked out on it and like did it on the weekends and everything, and he learned like crazy. He knew that thing like the back of his hand. It was crazy. And he had a decent job. I think he was a senior buyer or something. Anyway, this all started one day where he created some report in SAP, and he gave it to his boss, and it ended up going through the ranks, ended up on the CEO's desk of the company, and the guy was like, man, this is awesome. Who did this? And anyway, he got promoted, and it was all because of his knowledge of SAP, and now he's like next in line to be COO because he understands the technology. Well, they didn't spend any money. They already had the tech. It's just no one was using it. So, I know it's simplistic, but if you have software or machines that have capabilities, geek out on that stuff and learn anything you can about what you've already paid for, because that's the cheapest way to move the needle forward a little bit. I wrote down here, and this is just kind of one of those things, people talk about the fears of what we're coming, the direction we're going. And the fear is generally not, so people think about the artificial intelligence will kill us all, right? The kind of dystopian, Skynet scenario. And at least right now, with the technology we currently have, the fear is not that computers are going to become more like humans. The bigger fear is that we as humans are becoming a lot more like computers. And human behavior is changing in a much more kind of black and white, like the gray areas are disappearing. And that is dangerous. I don't have a solution for that, but it's just an observation that like the way we interact with social media and with each other and with technology, like we are starting to think much more like humans, which takes the humanity out, right? Like I think there is value. Ooh, that's a clear sign. Yeah, got it. Anyway, it's just an observation. Like we need to keep the humanity in it somehow. Like, who wants to live in a world that's just black and white? Like the fun part is the areas in between. But anyway.
All right, Patrick, thank you again.
Do you have something else?
The comments?
Yeah. Okay.
You've got one more?
Just super quick. It's like 10 seconds.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, this is who I am. So people look at like the doctor-nurse scenario, and everyone thinks that doctors are safe and nurses are in trouble when it comes to automation. And it's exactly the opposite. It's exactly the opposite, because doctors, like 90% of their, we're talking about general practitioners, 90% of their patient appointments involve roughly 24 diagnoses. Right? They have a cold, they have the flu, they broke their ankle. I mean, it's basic stuff, right? And meanwhile, it's the nurses that have to have emotional intelligence and build trust with their patients and relationships and all that stuff. Like, that's the hard part. So the nursing profession, that's safe for quite a while, I think. I mean, there's efficiencies for sure, but the job, I think, is going to stay there. Whereas doctors, imagine the kiosks where you order from McDonald's at Amsterdam Airport and all you do is just push. Well, imagine a big thing where it's got a human body and you're like, you hit the elbow because your elbow hurts, and it goes, and it's got different options, and within like 5 or 6 questions. The model, by the way, comes from TurboTax, where in TurboTax, when you open up TurboTax, it asks you like a dozen questions, and you only see the dozen questions that you got. But the reality is, it's an enormous decision tree that funnels you into the exact right place, right? It's a decision tree, just software-based. And so the same thing's going to happen, and you go into a doctor's office and just hit a couple things, and boom, you already know where you're going. So.
All right. Patrick,
thank you.
so
Thank you,
much.
Bill. Thank you
This
very
was
much.
awesome.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Okay, so now we're at near the end of our program, and what we wanted to do is give you some insight as to where our state government is going next. So we have a new administration, the Newsom administration, and we're very, very fortunate to have with us today one of the leaders of the Office of Economic Impact. And that person is Anish Raman, and he is here with us. Please join me in welcoming Anish to the stage. And Anish, are you mic'd up?
There we go.
All right, you ready?
I am.
All right.
Thank you all for having me. I can talk real loud too. There we go. Okay, thank you for having me. I will start with the fact that I am the child of immigrants. So my dad came here February 4th, 1971 from India because then as now, for so many people, America was singularly the land of possibility. And that has shaped my life. I started my career as a CNN war correspondent. I was in Iraq, all across the Middle East, in countries where all of us, really smart, driven people, had 0% chance to work hard and get ahead. There was no such thing as economic mobility because the hurdles in front of them were insurmountable. I left CNN in 2008 to join the Obama campaign, became a speechwriter at the Treasury Department for Secretary Geithner during the height of the financial and economic crisis in 09-10. That laid bare for me the fault lines in our economy and the disconnect we were seeing between Wall Street and Main Street. Went on to write for President Obama as one of his speechwriters on the economy and immigration. And a lot of what we started to talk about was restoring the basic bargain of America, that you could work hard and get ahead, which is just another way of describing the American dream, which was increasingly not well. And by that point, I had realized that all those countries I had been in where I felt so bad for the people who, like us, were smart and driven but had no options, increasingly that was becoming more and more true in this country, in communities across this country, and that felt shameful to me. It felt un-American. It felt like something I had to do something about. And so when I left the White House, President Obama, many of us were very hopeful, idealistic about technology as the greatest weapon that humans had ever had to deal with real structural issues. And so I joined 2 early-stage social impact startups, and then most recently was at Facebook, heading up economic and social impact. Again, trying to see if we could, through technology at scale, revive mobility. I love the work we were doing. I think that there's a lot of potential still for technology to do good, very clear challenges that we're all seeing as well. But when Governor Newsom won, and Lenny Mendoza, who's his chief economic advisor, I saw a team that really, from a policy perspective, which I think is an important perspective, could enter the debate. And I say that as someone who was at Facebook when Mark went and testified and dealt with senators who didn't know what the business model of Facebook was. And it's not something that is amusing for us as citizens. It should be really scary because we need the policy makers to be educated and through that education empowered enough to start to shape this transition that we're experiencing into the digital age. And that really is a core mission of our office. It's how do we make the economy work again for everyone. California has so much to be proud of. We're the 5th largest economy in the world. We lead in so many areas, trade, manufacturing, technology. We have the fastest rate of new businesses in the country, in part because of VC funding, state of the, world-class universities, state-of-the-art labs, the workforce. But we also face really serious headwinds. We're the richest and poorest state. 8 million Californians live below the poverty line. 1 in 5 kids in this state is in poverty. And when you add to that everything that you guys have been talking about today, there's enormous potential for those issues to get exacerbated, those challenges to just grow deeper, if we don't get involved and if we don't manage this transition. And so one of the most important things we're doing is the Future of Work Commission, which the governor announced. Lenny in our office, myself, Lande, the governor's higher ed advisor, and Julie Su, the labor secretary, are the core team building out what this commission will be. We will have commission members named, I hope, by the end of the month, and the commission should start meeting sometime by July 4th. But the idea really is to look comprehensively at supply and demand of workforce and what's coming in the future and deal with all the different challenges, but also opportunities. At a basic level, our hope here is to take this debate from a place of abject fear and dystopia to a place of agency and investment that we can do. And it'll really, I think, come down to skills training and how do we do that at every different entry point that's possible, whether that's through the higher ed institutions, through employers. AT&T is just undergoing a massive retraining effort of its workforce, multi-year effort. They recognized they had gone from a telephone company to a media company, and rather than just cycling an entire workforce through and getting new folks, they're making the investment to train the folks they've got. Obviously, there is ways that we at the state level, we've got an online community college that we've launched, can try to provide those skills, apprenticeships, all sorts of stuff, and all of it is up for discussion in the commission. And so for anyone interested in this discussion and in shaping what we do at the state level, I encourage you to stay aware of and involved in the commission. It's a public process. All the hearings will be public, and we're trying to make sure that we have a real back and forth that we build with all of you and all citizens in California as part of it. I say that just to also give you context for kind of some of the other priorities we have, just so you have them in mind. Again, our goal is to make sure the economy works for everyone today and for future generations. On the today side, the biggest issue we're dealing with is a cost crisis of housing, healthcare, and education for citizens. It's affecting businesses as well. We still have a lot of businesses start to grow, but when they get to that mid-size level, they start looking at Colorado or at Austin, and we've got to figure that out. Part of that is helping them look closer to Fresno and other areas in the inland part of the state, but we've got to deal with that cost crisis. And the second part is that focus of inclusive growth across the state. If you go from 2010 to 2018, 70% of the job growth we had as a state came basically from like LA, the Bay Area, and San Diego, 70%, which is off proportion. I don't know the exact percentage of population in those areas, but it's higher than it should be in terms of its role in our growth. So we've got to get more growth inland. We launched a new effort last week called Regions Rise Together. Myself, Lenny and Kate Gordon, who's the head of our Office of Planning and Research, are spearheading that. And the goal is really to go to different parts of the state, inland communities, understand the different needs that they've got, and then figure out by November, when we've got a big economic summit happening in Fresno, what are the specific ways that the state can be additive? What are the specific actions we can take that can support the regional development that's happening there? And a lot of those conversations, as we've started to have them, are going to come back to future of work and come back to skills training. And so I think that that's going to be a cornerstone of that effort. And then on the long-term side, how do we make sure the economy works for future generations? It's future of work. How do we end up with a constant source of quality jobs, not just jobs, but quality jobs that allow people to have mobility? But also do that mindful of climate change and the very real and growing impacts of climate change. Part of that is resilience. Wildfires are going to become just a constant for us as a state. And how do we just get better prepared for that? But also, how do we really take ownership of the clean energy economy? Electric vehicles are now our 7th biggest export. It's an amazing start for us. Green mobility is an industry among many within the clean energy sector that we can try and shore up. And so those are the two long-term goals that we've set for ourselves, is how do we get more ready on the clean energy side, and then through the Future of Work Commission and through the regional effort that we're going to do, make sure we're setting up California for quality jobs in the future. I will just end, and then I think we have time for questions. I'd love any of them, with just our posture. So the Office of Economic Impact, we should cross our fingers because it's currently and literally today in front of the legislature to debate. We inherited an office called the Governor's Office of Business and Economic Development. In shorthand, it's been referred to as GoBiz, which had issues across a whole spectrum At one end, people thought in the previous administration, potentially especially, it was like, go biz, farewell, that there was like an active disinterest in partnering with the business community. At the other end of the spectrum, it describes this in a really myopic, specific way about business licensing and permits. And really what we're trying to do, and it's not just our shop, it's more broadly across the administration, is more properly staff the 5th largest economy in the world. I mean, you look at some of these other states and the teams that they have are by scale bigger than ours. Their investments and their playbooks are much more sophisticated. And so this is the beginning of an effort to try and do that. And it's very purposeful. The reason we've said economic impact, economic because it is broader than just the business outreach, and impact because it's not just about planning and development, it's about impact. We want to start holding ourselves accountable to a data-based, impact-oriented planning process. And so this regional effort that we're doing, we're going to be going into the regions, but one of the things we announced too is a real openness to start partnering with people who have data sets that in a more comprehensive way can judge health of community, health of economy. We got to move away from just GDP and jobs being the sole ways that we judge health of the economy. And we want to all have the same numbers and be able to track our efforts collectively as a state against them over the years so that we can judge whether what we're doing is working. So you've got a new administration, one that comes from the private sector, the governor, Lenny, myself, a lot of the team. We bring that sensibility to our job. But most importantly, we have humility. We come with problems, but we would like your help in figuring out the answers. Partnership, we can't do it alone. It's like a literal thing, given the impact we're trying to have. And so we want to be able to support efforts that are underway across all sectors. And then the last thing I just say is urgency. These are big challenges that are growing bigger by the day, and there are a lot of economic indicators that are leaving a lot of people feeling like everything's okay. And we've got to get ahead of these, and we've got to take control from all sectors of what's going to happen as we transition more fully into the digital age, and we know we can't do that without all of you.
Anish, thank you very much for that. We do have time for... So this really is a rare opportunity to ask Anish some questions. So are there any questions about where the new administration is going? Adrian. Oh, Adrian has the mic. He doesn't have a question.
We got one.
So...
Bill, hold on.
okay, here we go. And if you could, your name and then the question, please.
Christy Jewell, excuse me, with William Jessup University, and I'm near militant about experiential learning. And I just want to encourage you with the governor's office and with GoBiz. The state of California as an employer is obviously the biggest employer in the state. And I can go online at any time and find maybe 200 student assistant positions that are available with the state. And I think you could just grow that, you know, can harness the power of all of the industry sectors that you are across, and you can exponentially double, triple those internship, experiential learning opportunities to dive into your K-12s, your community colleges, and your private and public colleges and universities. And you've got about, I don't know what huge percentage of your workforce is retirement eligible, and everybody's up a creek across, you know, most public sectors. And if we don't start providing more opportunities, paid, unpaid, we don't care. We want quality. I want to be able to pick up a phone, call somebody at a small, medium, or large state agency, and be able to place a kid quick.
That's a great idea. I'm taking notes, not texting. I left my notebook down there. But that's great. And I think those are some of that's a good example of a tangible outcome that we hope to come out of the commission process so that it isn't just a report. But again, it's additive and actionable. And anyone that has those now or later, please email them, and we will catalog them.
We have a question right over here, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you, Anish. My name is Amy Schultz, and I'm the Dean for Career Continuing and Technical Education at Sierra College here in Rockland, just down the road. And we, at Sierra College, especially in CTE, we've done a real focus with aligning with our local employers. We've built up our advanced manufacturing, mechatronics, robotics, cybersecurity, really future-focused, embedding new world of work 21st century skills throughout. So our students are ready, and they're getting hired, which is awesome. One of our biggest challenges, though, and I think Kevin can probably agree with this, is attracting students to these fields. So we're hearing more about the importance of skills and competencies, yet there's still, if you talk to parents and counselors, there's still this, no, you need to go get a bachelor's degree and go straight there. And guess what? We get people with bachelor's degrees that come back to our programs. Yeah. So if we're and one of our focuses, our statewide effort is really closing the equity gap. If we can close the equity gap by bringing students into our programs and they're coming out and making good livings without taking on a lot of debt, we'd really love to be able to tell that story more. And any connections with industry, employers that, you know, the jobs are there without the bachelor's degree, or they'll pay for your bachelor's degree while you're getting it. I think that can help us tell that story to parents and counselors and really change the message of what higher ed is all about.
Yeah, that's great, and couldn't agree more. I was at Facebook before that, at EdTech startup, and I was experiencing firsthand how we went from, there's a great book, End of College, that goes through the history of higher ed and how it kind of landed in a place that wasn't good for anyone, especially students. But we went all the way to 4-year Bachelor of Arts degree. That wasn't helping folks. And then we went the other end of like, well, no one needs anything. Go to boot camps, which also isn't representative as an answer for the full society. And I think we're maturing in the Obama administration. We tried to get there a little bit too, to a place of there are multiple ways for you to get the skills you need, and also these are going to be lifelong learning processes that you're going to have to go into. And that's, I think, a big focus for the commission too, will be really setting that standard. These were the old skills, now here are the new skills. We'll check back with you in a few generations. We're all gonna have to be lifelong learners. We can't just say that and then expect workers to deal with the burden of that, both figuring out what the skills are, but also the costs associated with it. That's where the rest of us have to come in to build that system, but I think that's the great challenge of our time, is how do we build that adaptive, agile system that can update as the skills that are needed change.
Anish, we have time for one more question.
Hi, Colleen Moorhead. So the question I have, if you don't mind, can I hold it? It just feels odd, no? She's, okay. I like to walk into it. So, anyway, question goes to, with a new governor and administration, part of our challenge when we're trying to address the digital gap is that there's also a lack of teachers at in the K-12 space in particular. And so when we look at statistics just here within Sacramento County, what we see is less than 25% of students in the K-12 space really have access to even an introduction to computer science course. This is to me, this is a massive gap, and this is just within Sacramento County. I'm going to commend Placer County. Their percentages are much greater, probably as a result of greater investments and partnerships. My question to you goes to what is the governor's commitment to investing actual dollars in training teachers for STEM, for ICT, computer skills, addressing this digitalization gap that we have within our K-12 system in particular, but also what are the structural changes that can be made within credentialing, for instance, and or providing a space where employers can be mentors and come directly into the classroom and really start engaging students earlier?
Yeah, it's a great question. The governor's committed to it. He ran as part of his campaign with a focus on bringing CS, not just into high schools, but bringing all of this into early childhood education. I concede my tenure, which has just been about a month, that I don't know the specifics of the policy plan of implementation on that. It's been with the higher ed advisor and the education folks, but I'll look into that out of this session. I will say that there is a conviction, not just a belief, but a conviction that the moment has passed for various groups to be doing various projects that are about Code for America or bring AP to high school. Like we are in a moment where we have to organize at scale across sectors and just accept this as a new normal rather than something that's interesting and coming far down the line. And so we are looking to get the best ideas because so many people have been thinking about these issues for so long. Future of work, everywhere you turn, someone's got to study and someone's got thoughts. And so we've got to organize that so that we can start without being redundant to that. Here's what everyone has said, and now what are we going to do about it, and how do we bring something additive from the state level? So same with that. Any ideas that you have or real specific pain points, please let me know, and I'll funnel them inside. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Okay. So we are just about wrapped up for Future Forum for this year, but on your tables, I believe that you might have something. Evan, do we have something for them to fill out? So inside your program is something that you can fill out that will give us some insights as to what you liked about the program, but also our intention is to do this again next year. So to the extent that you can give us some good insights about topics that you want to cover, the thing that you found valuable, how we could improve, and experiment, we would really appreciate hearing from you. So that's it for our program. I want to re-emphasize that the workforce investment boards are here. They're here working for you. They're listening. And all of the materials that we've had, that we will push those back out to you. And we really look forward to working with you going forward. There's additional information here about the new website that the workforce boards are utilizing. We hope that you'll visit it. And again, on behalf of Valley Vision and all of our workforce investment boards, thank you so much for joining us today.